Welcome to the East Lansing City Council special discussion only meeting of April 28th, 2026. The meeting will come to order. Could we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Whalen.
Here.
Councilmember Meadows.
Here.
Councilmember Singh. Mayor Pro Tem Grigsby.
Here.
Mayor Altman.
Here. Councilmember Singh is traveling and will not be able to join us. I would entertain a motion to excuse her absence.
So moved.
Moved by Meadows,
I'll second.
second by Grigsby. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Councilmember Singh is excused. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Meadows, second by Whalen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda is approved. Communications from the audience. I have no slips. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to address the council? If so, please approach the podium. State your name.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on my comments from last week. After the public comments, is the clock running, so I know how long I have.
Could you also state your name for the record, please?
Lee June,
Thank you.
East Lansing resident. I just wanted to follow up my comments from last week. After the public comments, you went around the table and you made some what I would call empathic comments about the situation in East Lansing, and that was much appreciated. You showed some empathy in terms of what's been going on, and my hope is that that empathy will now be followed up by some concrete actions, and so we will be looking forward to those actions. And I've been in, major positions, and I understand the difficulty that you face as you make these challenges, but I would encourage you to be bold as these issues arise. There are two ways of creating problems. One is that problems happen and you handle them badly. Another area is that you can take an action and also create problems. And so I want to speak in my next few minutes to that action. One of the things I like to do is to look at situations and ask the questions, if I do X or Y, what will be the outcome, even if X or Y does not occur? And so I would encourage you to, as you move forward, to not take some actions that we can predict that will create problems. And so I believe in prevention. And what I would hope you would do is, as we move forward, that there's certain things you won't do. For instance, I've heard that there's a plan to maybe get rid of the Human Relations Commission, the Police Oversight Committee, or to reorganize it. I think that would be a bad move, because a city without a Human Relations Committee and a Police Oversight Committee does not send a good message to the community. The other area I'd like to speak directly to is I want to commend you, at least up until this point, that you have not eliminated the diversity officer and the diversity office in the city. Many places are doing that. And the person who currently occupies that, from my standpoint, is well known in the community and has a set of expertise that I think the city needs as we go forward. So I would just plead with you that if you took any of those actions, you will know the outcome, and the outcome would not be positive. So I'm trying to present to you a preventative step that I think you can take, and I hope at least you will take. So, I know Dr. Altman, I know Ms. Singh, I know Mr. Meadows, I know Mr. Grigsby, not extremely well, and I know the other one. So I hope you'll be people of integrity and not take those kinds of actions that if you took them, we know what the outcome would be. It would send a very chilling message to the community, And I want to continue to live in East Lansing and for it to be a community that I'm proud of. Let's not turn back the clock. And as I mentioned the last time, and I'll close with this, Malachi 6:8, love mercy, do justice, and walk humbly with God. So in the words of Spike Lee in his movie, I would hope as we move forward, you would do the right thing. And since you would know what the right thing to do, and it's not to do some of the things I hope you don't do, just do what Nike said, just do it, the right thing. My prayers are with you, and I hope I won't be coming back to this mic that often. This is only my second time in 20-something years, but we will be watching, and we want the community to move forward. And the last point is that, as I mentioned before, you have Ms. Hardy and the commissions that will give you good advice. There are also people in the community who can do the same, but we won't be calling you. We hope if you really want to hear and do the right thing, maybe you would call us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak? Please approach the podium and state your name.
Hi, my name is Nazita Lejavardi. I'm a resident of East Lansing. I wasn't planning on addressing you tonight, but I wanted to echo the past speaker. It came to my attention today in office hours that the funding for the Human Rights Commission and the ELIPOC group is considering to be reduced, if not eliminated. And I just wanted to urge the City Council to think about that before they do so. These are entities, especially the Human Rights Commission, that has done some extraordinary work in terms of checks and balances. I think it's incredibly important in terms of a healthy democracy, speaking from a political scientist perspective, to have those checks on our government. And I then wanted to address the City Council. I know this is an issue that probably you're going to tell me this is an ongoing investigation you can't do anything about, but I want to talk about the murder of Isaiah Kirby. This is one of our students, Michigan State student. This is, the murder of this child has echoed throughout our community. It is something that is being discussed over and over and over again among our students. Our students do not feel safe. I have students who are telling me that they're afraid to go off campus. Again, this is happening in my office hours. And I don't know really what to tell them because, of course, not a lot of information has come out from this investigation, but I am afraid for our students and they are afraid as well. I don't think that they take it lightly, especially many of them being students of color, that they may not be safe. If an altercation happens, if they have a mental health crisis and something escalates, that they would not lose their lives. And so I felt an obligation today to come and to share with you what was shared with me from my students. And I really hope that in your capacities and whatever you can do, you can at least provide some information. There are so many kids who are about to graduate and they feel this immense fear and sadness for the loss of their classmate, and in such a brutal way. And I, again, wasn't going to speak today, but it was something that came up in office hours, and I felt I should share that with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would care to address the council? Please state your name, please.
Hi, I'm Sunshine Morgan McIntyre Jr. Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, community leaders, and residents. My name is Sunshine Morgan McIntyre Jr., and I proudly serve as president of the Lansing NAACP Youth Council. I'm here today representing the voices of young people across the city. I stand firmly in opposition to the dissolution of the Human Rights Commission and LPOC. These commissions are not just groups, they are safeguards. They exist to protect fairness, ensure accountability, and give a voice to people who might otherwise go unheard. As a young leader, I care deeply about the kind of city we are building, not just for today, but for the future. And decisions like this shape how young people see their community and their leaders. If we remove these commissions, what message are we sending? That equality no longer matters? Or that some voices are less important than others? Young people are paying attention. We will be of voting age soon, and we're learning from you. We need leadership that stands up for everyone, not just when it's easy, but when it matters most. I urge you to vote against dissolving these commissions and to stand on the side of equity, accountability, and justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to address the council? If so, please approach the podium. Seeing none, are there any callers?
There's one caller in the queue. Caller with your phone number ending in 552, you are now free to address the council.
Good evening, Kath Edsall. I am an inaugural member of the East Lansing Independent Police Oversight Commission, so I'm not speaking on behalf of the commission. My experiences are valued. And while some of the speakers tonight may have talked about these proposed changes to the budget as dissolution of the commissions, and your pushback would be we're not dissolving these commissions, defunding us has a similar impact to dissolution. You've already altered our ordinance to the point of making us pretty much ineffectual and removing the funds, the $43,000 worth of funds that have been in our budget, is retaliatory on behalf of the city manager who hasn't liked us speaking out, and the city council the same. The comment before the budget item that says, we haven't spent these monies and therefore it's okay to get rid of them is ludicrous. The first item for a bias investigator we've been talking about for 3 years. We have asked for investigators. We were provided a list of, we asked for bias investigators. We were provided a list of retired police officers. We already had ELPD telling us there was no bias because nobody used the N-word. We needed somebody who is trained in anti-bias to look at cases and bring forth a recommendation to the police department. So then we were told to ask for a reviewer because that was different than an investigator. We asked for a reviewer. Months pass, nothing comes of that. No one tells us that we can move forward with that. And then we're told we can shelve it because Mayor Brookover had recommended an independent review and it would cover that. Only to find out that the independent reviewer is not an anti-bias reviewer. The independent reviewer protects city governments against civil litigation. And so to take that $22,000 out of our budget when we have complaints dating back to our origination that we have concerns about were biased, that we would like investigated, but we can't because the city manager, the city council, the police chief don't want to really hear that there's bias in their department. When we move down to the independent review of police data, to say that we didn't spend that money, we spent that money last year on Cedric Carreau. Cedric Carreau did a great statistical analysis of the use of force data, and surprise, surprise, came out with a finding that there is bias in our use of force, that black people have force used against them more often than white people and more often their percentage in the community. This police chief, this city manager, and this council didn't like that outcome. So what do? We're going to cut the funding for that and not fund Cedric Carreau to do an analysis on the 2025 data because we cannot change if we don't know what needs to be changed. And that's exactly how it's being handled by these city attorneys and the city manager is we don't know what needs to be changed. We don't have to change it. The NACOL board training was a training to help us understand the ordinance that we had. We had somebody lined up to come in and do that training, and then the ordinance was changed. So we had to put a pause on it. An ordinance that in the midstream is changed, there's no point in having that person come do a training for us on the old ordinance. So we put a pin in it, and now that funding is going to get cut. And then the last one, because we didn't have a moderated community meeting last year, doesn't mean we can't have a moderated community meeting this year. That's, again, a ridiculous assumption that we don't need those funds because we didn't spend them last year. All of these things are important to the commission's work, especially since so much of what we could do was removed by the changes in the ordinance, that having an independent investigator look specifically at bias in the police department, having the ability to have a NACOL, an outside person, look at our ordinance and help us understand how we can best use it, because the city attorney is not going to help us in the best way to use this ordinance. They're in cover your ass mode. And so they are trying to keep us from using the ordinance in the best way possible. And then having community input with a moderator to remove that shows, again, exactly what you don't want to have happen. Hear from this community what they would like to see changed. in
You
the
have
police
30 seconds
department.
remaining.
My last few comments are simply focused on the shooting of Isaiah Kirby. There are things you can do. Our previous police chief released the video footage within days of the shooting of DeAnthony Van Atten. Release all the body-worn camera footage. There is the only people holding you back is yourself. Be transparent, open, and accountable to this community and release the footage. If they did everything right, so be it. Everyone will see that with their own eyes.
Thank you for your comments. Your time has expired. Are there any more callers?
There are no more callers.
All right, that brings us to, please address the podium.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. My name is Kelly Ellsworth Atchison, and I wanted to speak on some of the succession of changes that have been coming out of the city as well as the city council in regards to the changes I spoke on last week with the moving the city asset from Elaine Hardy from the Police Oversight Commission as well as the Human Relations Commission, and now the funding that's being addressed. They're looking at removing $40,000 from the Police Oversight and the $2,000 from the Human Relations Commission. I served on the study commission along with Chuck Grisby, and we found, and the city council also found, that there was a need for oversight, for transparency, for accountability. Not telling police what to do, not trying to defund police, but we reviewed the data, not our data, your data, on the over-policing. And I am surprised to see, Chuck, you sitting here now in this role, that you've walked back on the importance of the Police Oversight Commission. That is surprising to me. Many of you, I know that Mr. Meadows and Mayor, when you particularly, Mayor, ran on the platform of the city government that we had before, or the city council that we had before, that it was in chaos, was your words that you used. And I'm seeing nothing but chaos happening right now. And so that's what I want to address. I'm asking for consideration. We need accountability. We need transparency. There's nothing wrong with that, and I'm not sure why people are afraid of that. If there's nothing being done wrong, then be transparent to the citizens. Be transparent to the community. You talked specifically, sir, when you ran, about the chaos also within the staff, not having trust, the staff no longer having trust in city council. Having someone with their stellar career and talent, such as Ms. Hardy, being blindsided, that erodes trust. And so I'm asking for reconsideration. I'm asking for us to remove chaos. That was what you ran on. But now you are supporting chaos, creating chaos. Mr. Bellman is not working in a vacuum. He's not making decisions absent his leader. He reports to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would care to address the council? Okay, then that concludes communications from the audience, which brings us to communications from the mayor and council members. Councilmember Whalen.
Just a few things. I do, again, encourage patience and allowing this very, very difficult situation on so many different people's parts. I appreciate patience and decorum and support for all those involved. Also, on another situation, I was made aware that tomorrow is a day to wear denim in support of sexual violence victims and survivors. I think that's a huge issue in our community to make sure we are made aware of and have advocacy for. That's all I have.
Mr. Meadows.
Just briefly, based on the comments that were at the podium, made at the podium, there has been zero discussion of the elimination of DEI or the elimination of LPOC or the elimination of the Human Rights Commission. So I don't know where that is coming from, and if you have heard that, it's not from anybody who has any knowledge of it, because no council member has had that conversation, and the council hasn't had that conversation. I've not had that conversation with staff. No one is proposing that. So to the extent that was something that anybody was worried about, I don't know what'll happen 20 years from now, but I will tell you right now, there is no discussion with regard to that.
Mr. Grigsby.
Thank you. Yeah, I echo that. I don't know of any conversation of some of the things that were said at the podium just tonight as well. And in regards to anything that you may hear about where I stand or what I don't stand, either it's going to come straight from my mouth or it's going to be coming from publications and things that I send out. And I recommend people take a look at that information. It's out there available. Take a look at the information to get a hold of me as well. It's out there as well. And I think once you have an opportunity to look through thoroughly some of the things you're concerned about, you may be abreast of where I am and who I am and what I stand for when it comes to those certain issues.
Thank you. And for my part, I will just note that at our last meeting, we amended our meeting schedule to move start times for discussion-only meetings for the rest of the year to start at 6 p.m. And we moved start times for regular business meetings to start at 6:30 p.m. And so I'll ask people to make a note of that, and I hope we can arrange for communications in various ways to make sure that that reaches the public. Which brings us to communications from the city manager, Mr. Bellman.
So my first communication, I'm going to phone a friend and ask Cliff Walls to step up and announce the event at the library that he wanted me to share, but I think he could do much better than I.
Mr. Walls.
Yeah, so I mentioned this at the meeting on the 7th that we had plans, if you adopted the new framework for pollinator landscapes, that we were planning on hosting an event to kind of explain those changes and have an opportunity for the public to ask questions and see pictures and hear it from us, from our mouths. So that's happening from 6 to 8 on Thursday at the library. I'm going to start with probably a 20-30 minute presentation of the ordinance changes, the policy framework, where to find those on our website. And then there's a panel for the remainder of the time, which has experts from MSU Beal, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Pollinator Task Force Coordinator, Michigan Audubon's Conservation Manager, and a woman from ADAPT. It's a local ecological community group, and they help residents and neighbors implement some of these themes. So just wanted to make sure to elevate that to the community. It was on short notice because it's been under a month since that was passed. So we threw it together. I think it's going to be a great program and invite you all and the whole community to come out.
And this is the No Mo May retirement party.
Yes, that's
correct.
That's the catchy name to hopefully address what we're doing, but
Yep.
it's the evolution of No Mo May into something that we think is better and more
And that's
impactful.
Thursday at the library,
Thursday at the library from 6 to 8 p.m.
6 to 8 p.m. All right. Appreciate that announcement. Thank you. Any further communications, Mr. Bellman?
So the other item I wanted to share is that Wendy Yaney Human Resources Administrator, and Carrie Sampson, Communications Director, helped arrange for a counselor funded by the city to be available today to any of the residents at 25 East, to anybody at Big B or Marco's, or even the construction workers at the Meyer gas station, if they wanted to talk to somebody about the events that played out on April 15th. And so that was today. I don't have the final report of attendance, but we continue to extend any counseling services that may be needed for anybody in the community. I know MSU did their own for their students or affiliates, and I just wanted to make sure we offered something to East Lansing residents. And then, if I may, just before we get into budget discussion. So, as has been shared in communications to council, the budget process, of course, starts in earnest in December, looking at personnel positions. And then we start looking and meeting with departments to not only analyze year-to-date estimates for the current fiscal year that can then inform the financial forecast that's shared with you in February, but also to look at trends of where revenue actually is tracking and where expenditures are at. And so that helps the finance department, that helps me, that helps departments identify and align the resources that we truly need within the revenues that we've been provided by our residents, either through property taxes, the income tax, or fees that they pay for certain services. So yes, you have a laundry list of items that are before you that have been adjusted based on those trends. And it is not intended to dissolve any of our boards or commissions, which two were impacted more than others because the others only have $2,500 in their budget, and they use that for training. The two boards and commissions that were identified tonight, much larger budget, and we looked at what was actually spent over the past couple of years and adjusted them. They're in my memo that I provided to you, dated April 13th, just to call out. Some were new items that were added over the current fiscal year. And so our goal was not to increase the deficit, but to try to find ways to reduce the deficit. I think the community, as well as everybody at council, knows the city put a ballot issue before our residents to ask for dedicated funding for parks and recreation. That failed in November. And the message we received was live within the resources you have. And so that's the discussion that you started on the 14th of April that will continue tonight. That will be the subject of a public hearing on the 12th, and changes that may occur all the way up to and after the budget's adopted here in May and takes effect in July. And I've always said to my staff, as well as I've said and will repeat to any board or commission, if there's something that's not in your budget that you think is of value, come back to council and ask for appropriations throughout the year. My goal was not to budget a deficit that could result in the elimination of existing positions when they were budgetary deficits and not actual needs at this time. If there are actual needs at the time they need it, they can come back and ask. So thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to item 3.1, which is discussion of the fiscal year 2027 preliminary budget with emphasis on specific divisions. Mr. Bellman, do you want to lead us off?
So the first item in your packet is answers to budget questions that have been raised by council members from the last discussion on April 14th. So the questions are identified and then the answers are provided so that council has that in their possession. And again, if there's any questions that are raised tonight that we don't know, we will also research and get that information back to you. Included in the packet again is the April 13th memo I provided you that identified additional requests from departments, be it in positions, be it in funding, as well as the adjustments that were made to the Human Rights Commission and the Independent Police Oversight Commission. And of course, all the supporting documents. Tonight, we're going to focus on, I think DPW is up first. So Ron Lacoste, so all things DPW and environmental services will be shared with you this evening. And then we'll move into Parks and Recreation.
Welcome, Director Lacoste.
Thank you. Now, I've been told that there's a little bit of a delay, or could be a little bit of a delay, between when I say next slide and the next slide actually appearing on the screen. So we'll have to, may have to wait a little bit before you see the slide that I'm moving to. Good evening, Council. My name is Ron Lacoste, the Director of Public Works and Environmental Services. And I'm here before you to talk about the Public Works fiscal year 2027 budget. The DPW budget spans 7 different funds and generates GIS charges, fleet rental rates, and DPW labor charges used by several other department heads in their budgets. This budget also generates water and sewer rates, which are paid by residents for their water and sewer services. While I'm the one up here presenting it, I did not present this by myself, or did not prepare this by myself. Who I have with me tonight is Romy Fitchin. I always have trouble with that. She was lucky enough to start 2 months before the budget kicked off. She's our budget and accounting analyst, a new position, because last year was my first budget, and I spent much of that budget season breathing into a paper sack. Romy was able to change that for me and has done a lot of work to get up to speed in 2 short months to help a tremendous amount with the budget. So I can't thank her enough. She is a large part of putting this together and orchestrating this. Also involved is environmental and sustainability manager Cliff Walls, engineering administrator Stephen Clayton, the operations team of Orlando Chapel, Homer Allen and Marcus Grossons, the WRF leadership team of Josh Moore and Martin Fabric, GIS and asset management analyst Dina Fitzgerald, and department coordinator Brad Phillips. Next slide. As you can see, the Department of Public Works operation consists of 88 full-time, oops, back a slide, sorry. Consists of 88 full-time staff and a budget of just under $83 million, which is a 13.9% increase from fiscal year 26. You guys all right? You good?
Yep, we're good. We're just trying to locate ourselves.
As you can see on each slide, there's a budget document page number to help you kind of locate what we're looking at. It's a 13.9% increase from fiscal year 26, and this is primarily driven by capital project costs for the WRF and the CSO, the Combined Sewer Overflow Project down in the Cedar Village area. The general fund portion of DPW is administration, and a portion of engineering, a portion of environmental services. Then you have sidewalks, alleys, and private roads, drains, parks maintenance, downtown maintenance, and street lighting. And you can see the portion of the pie that's related to that in brown. Then we have the internal service fund, which consists of our Garage and Public Works Services Pool, which is Fleet GIS, and the DBW Labor Pool. You have enterprise funds, which consist of your water and sewer funds, and then our special revenue funds, which is our major and local street funds, solid waste management funds, which is rubbish recycling and yard waste, which is funded by a millage. Next slide. So the administration, engineering and environmental services piece of the general fund is the admin functions of public works. There's a lot of payroll, invoicing, that type of overhead stuff, meetings, as well as our downtown maintenance, sidewalk, drains, alleys, and private roads and street lighting don't have admin or labor associated with it besides the pool and engineering doing project work. So all the work to process the invoices and administer those projects are lumped into this administration piece. Engineering, just over 61% of their labor costs are billed outside of the general fund to water and sewer on projects, streets, sometimes parks and rec if they're helping out with projects, parking, that type of thing. And the remainder stays in the general fund, and those are for things like reviewing site plans, some permitting, customer service, and the Transportation Commission activities. We're working on our work order process moving forward, which is one of Romy's tasks moving forward, to try to increase, make sure our time is being allocated to other funds appropriately, and I expect that number will increase next year. Environmental services consists of several items that were housed in other funds prior to 2024. So the urban forestry, stormwater functions were in engineering, urban forestry was in parks maintenance, and it became apparent that we needed to create our own division to more adequately reflect the environmental services piece of things. We took all the environmental and sustainability pieces and pulled these other pieces from other divisions of the general fund to create its own division. So when you see environmental services and you see in the budget narrative, it was started in 2024, that doesn't mean all that funding is new from 2024. We shifted things from other areas of the general fund into that fund, so it made more sense. So I wanted to clarify that piece of things. The budget for this section of the general fund is just over 1.7 million, which is a 14.4% decrease. And that's primarily due to the completion of the wet weather resiliency plan project that was majority grant funded, but that still shows up in this section of the budget. Next slide. Next up is the garage, GIS asset management, and the public works services pool. So the garage at DPW actually owns the entire fleet, and that includes police and fire vehicles, parking vehicles. So any vehicles you see with a city logo on the side are owned by DPW, and all of the rest of the city pays a rental rate. So it's sort of how IT owns all the computers and everybody pays the rental rate for that. So if the vehicle is in the fleet, the rental rate they pay is for the maintenance of that vehicle, the sale of that vehicle, the purchase of the new one, and the upfitting. Because when you buy a vehicle, you don't buy a plow truck, you buy a chassis, and then you have to pay an upfitter to actually build the plow part, the underbody, the front, the plow, the dump box, and all that. So anything you see that's not a standard truck you'd get is upfitted somewhere else, and then all the maintenance that happens during the service life of that equipment is handled by that rental rate. And what that means is you have somebody looking at the vehicle that has the city's interest at heart when it comes to making repair decisions versus replacement, and you get immediate turnaround. You're not sitting in a queue at a big truck shop when something rolls in and we're in the middle of snow and ice operations. That stuff gets the priority. We get that stuff back out usually within an hour or two versus waiting several days. So it's a huge advantage when it comes to service, especially emergency services. GIS asset management manages much of the city's infrastructure and data. So the infrastructure, data, and asset management process. So as asset lists, service life, drives maintenance activities. If you've seen any map provided by any other department, if you've seen data provided, that comes from that system. And Dina Fitzgerald handles all that, as well as asset life, all of our services that we do when we're jetting sewers, televising, cleaning catch basins, all of that data is input. You've seen our staff with tablets, they input that into the system so that we can pull that up and say, oh, we jetted that sewer 6 months ago, or when we get sewer backups or whatever it is, we can track that maintenance, and we know not only what's been done, but it helps drive where we're going. You don't really know where to go with maintenance unless you know where you've been. So that's a huge part of our operation. And then the services pool acts as the labor pool for the entire city. So it's a lot of the maintenance work that goes on. So it's activities related to infrastructure, grounds, obviously sanitation and recycling, yard waste, and parks maintenance. Also serves as the city's primary response to weather-related emergency response, such as rain events, snow events, and wind events. In addition, with police and fire, DPW is right out there during those events, tackling those and cleaning up and clearing ways and that kind of thing. Again, that is pooled in this account, and that is charged out as we perform work. Nobody pays a flat rate for the service as we perform work for different areas, whether it's Parks and Rec, whether it's parking, whether it's anybody, that is billed out as we perform that work. And again, that touches lots of different areas: police, fire, all these functions. Our police, fire, Parks and Rec, planning, clerk's office, the library. It's citywide, but for all these services. Budget for this is just over $8 million, which is a 5.9% increase. And this is primarily due to normal inflation, cost of living increases, and step increases for staff. Next slide. Downtown maintenance and parks maintenance. This used to be one division of DPW. If you remember, the DDA approved a new DDA lead worker to focus on the downtown. We had 2 parks maintenance staff that worked in the downtown, and it was sort of a side job, if you will, for our parks maintenance lead to try to manage the downtown as well, which is difficult, pulls a lot of different directions. So the DDA recognized that need, and they funded a downtown lead worker, and we're going to take those 2 staff out of parks maintenance and put them in a new downtown division. So there'll be 3 staff that'll be housed downtown, and we'll be able to focus much more proactively on downtown maintenance issues, and it fits perfectly with the addition of the DDA executive director. Right now, the proposal is to have them housed in the same office, so they'll have daily contact. So I think it's going to be a great partnership, and obviously Lori Mullins has lots of experience here, so that makes it even a more seamless transition to go that route. So we're in the process of looking at that lead worker position, and we'll move that forward. Catch up on my notes. So downtown maintenance, as you know, this staff manages efforts in the downtown related to all the rubbish and recycling, landscaping, all of the stuff that's down there, the bike racks, benches, tables, that type of thing. Snow and ice removal, which again will, instead of getting lumped in with parks where they run through the downtown and then they're off doing different parks things, this crew will now stay focused in the downtown, which will be a large improvement. So the street plows come by and all the sidewalk ramps get plowed in. Well, this team will be able to clear those back open, so that'll be a big improvement in the snow and ice in the downtown. Holiday decorations and supporting downtown events and related activities. And then parks maintenance will stick to the stuff they do outside of the downtown, which is activities related to mowing, landscaping, snow and ice removal outside of the downtown, recreation complexes, maintenance of parks assets, and such as playgrounds, tables, benches, bathrooms, all the stuff you see in the parks system. And it's important to note that Parks and Rec is where the programming and the capital projects are budgeted. It's parks maintenance is what this division does. So anything programming or capital is Parks and Rec. I also think it's important to note, and this is true of all DPW divisions, is the parks maintenance staffing isn't really changing in this new setup. They're going from 11 to 9 because the 2 staff that are already in the downtown are going to get moved over. But we were 11 staff in 2010. We had a dedicated supervisor to just parks. We were 15 staff in 2010 with a dedicated supervisor. Now we're 11 staff, and the supervisor is split between all the different DPW divisions. So this is still an area that we struggle to maintain, and as everybody knows, a lot of new parks amenities, a lot of new events that developed out of COVID and things like that. So this division continues to work really hard, and that's where you're going to see us looking at doing some smart reductions if we can. If we can, reduce some of our mowing and do some native plantings or wildflower type things to reduce mowing. You've seen out front of Hannah, reducing some of the landscaping, trying to focus on more targeted landscaping, because although mowing is work, it's a lot less work. Landscaping is the most labor intensive. So you'll see us doing some of that stuff so that we can make everything look good with less staff and still provide a quality environment. So that's kind of the balance you'll see in the coming years. We're going to try to do some of that stuff, and we're meeting monthly with Parks and Rec staff who shares that same goal. So it's been a great partnership, and you'll see some of those results. Again, this is a 2.9% increase in these areas, and again, primarily due to cost of living and step increases. Next slide. Sidewalks, drains, alleys, private roads, and street lighting divisions. Again, a general fund section. Sidewalks manage general sidewalk maintenance, the hazardous sidewalk program, snow and ice removal, and ADA sidewalk ramp improvements. Drains manages the city drain maintenance. We have 3 big drains. The Gortz, which is down kind of through the Flower Pot neighborhood, the Taylor, which runs north of the fire station, and the Friel, that's up by Abbey and behind Meyer there. Those are 3 city open drains. The rest are county, but we have to maintain those. And then we pay county drain assessments, as we discussed previously. There's lots of drain assessments that were put in place before we made the change last year to have some of those passed to property owners. And then administers the Eagle and NPDES permit, which is National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit, which is our separate storm sewer program. And it's a process where we have to eliminate and track pollutants in stormwater. We have a consultant that goes around and during dry weather tests outflow coming from storm sewers, and if they detect that there's waste, then we have to track that and see where that's coming from and eliminate that. So that's part of that program that we have to administer. Alleys and private roads manages maintenance of all of the alleys you see throughout the city, and there's private roads in Hawks Nest that we agreed to maintain as part of the development agreement when that was converted from a manufactured home park to a single-family residential neighborhood. And that's by development agreements. We have to provide road maintenance up to kind of heavy maintenance. We pothole, we crack seal, clean catch basin, sweep, but we don't do paving, that type of thing. That's on the neighborhood. Sign maintenance, we pay the street light bill. And then street lighting, which that pays the electric bills and the maintenance. The street lighting is primarily owned by the Board of Water, Light, and Consumers Energy, and we pay an annual fee for each street light. Depending on the type of light, your fancier lights cost more, your more standard roadside lights cost less. And the DDA contributes, I think, $121,000 in this budget for downtown street lighting for that. Budget for this is $3.1 million, and it says a 19.5% increase. That should say decrease, and that's primarily due to a reduction in drain projects. We had some drain projects we were trying to get through, and we ran into a lot of challenges with Eagle when it comes to working on open drains. It's quite a process. And then with the wet weather resiliency plan, some of the solutions that they are proposing include like the fire station, the pond north of the fire station, and other projects that we might impact. So we didn't want to do a multi-million-dollar project only to have the wet weather resiliency plan propose something else and waste that effort, especially since it's a general fund expenditure. So we thought we better pause that effort, and we're going to finish up that wet weather resiliency plan this fall and wait for the results of that and make sure we're not throwing money away on wasted projects. Major and local street fund. Revenue for major and local streets is the Michigan Transportation Fund, which is gas and weight tax, and the new neighborhood road fund, which is primarily marijuana receipts. The total impact of that funding is not completely known. Romy dug into the the websites and did some research. We've budgeted conservatively on the revenue that we're going to see from that, and I think the marijuana lawsuit is still pending, so some of that funding is still not completely settled, but that's a good news for the road funds. But we're cautiously optimistic on that. There is continued risk to the funding mechanism for roads because of more fuel-efficient vehicles. If we continue down the road of hybrids and electrification of vehicles, and then high gas prices, how long are they going to stick around, and how's that going to impact consumption, which of course could impact the money we get, so it might get offset. The extra revenue may get offset by lower gas and weight tax. We get money for trunk line maintenance, which MDOT funds are the maintenance of Saginaw, Michigan, and Grand River. And again, that's routine maintenance. It's not heavy maintenance that we perform on those trunk lines, and we are reimbursed for that cost, including retiree health care costs. It's a fully loaded reimbursement rate on that. And then our efforts in the street area, we utilize a pavement surface evaluation rating. It's called a PASER rating, where we drive all of our streets every 2 years and rate the pavements, and that helps drive our capital projects, and actually our maintenance and capital projects. Based on the PASER rating, it'll drive the maintenance versus construction decisions as we move forward. And then we pair that with utility information. It's quite a picture you have to put together to balance all that and make sure you're taking everything into account. But that's primarily our rating system for our asphalt pavements. The map you see on the left there is all the different jurisdictions that surround us. The roads that are not highlighted are East Lansing streets. All the other colors are somebody else's. So you can see the coordination it takes when you're doing projects or doing anything around the city. Is all those the red ones are private streets, but all the other colors are somebody else's jurisdiction. So you have to coordinate efforts and detour routes and all kinds of stuff. So it's a complicated picture. Funding for this is just over $12 million, a 9.2% increase, and that's primarily driven by increased local street projects in the coming year. Solid waste, which is funded by a millage of 1.825 mils. Again, covers the rubbish recycling and yard waste. The largest cost risk to this is the landfill tipping fees. We have kind of one game in town, which is Granger. And for whatever reason, they've not increased our fees for several years, and I back-checked and looked, and it's accurate. But now they've woken up to that and have contacted me and are looking for as much as a doubling of our rates over the next few years. They would like a very aggressive rate increase. I think we can more slow roll that, but that's one of the things we're looking at. And we meet monthly with City of Lansing just as a collaboration, and they are getting the same conversation. So I think they're trying to catch up some of the municipal customers. They're still offering a 20% reduction over their non-municipal customers, but their no increases for years have kind of caught up with them. So that's our biggest risk there. We are also coordinating. We have a regional facility that we bring our recycling to. When that facility came to town, there were certain material thresholds that we had to meet, volume or tonnage thresholds we had to meet to get rebates, and that was to entice them to come here and set up shop because they had no customers. And we're renegotiating that with Lansing. It's a partnership with Lansing. Now that they have other customers, Granger brings their recycling there, so they no longer, in our opinion, need that level of subsidy. So we're hoping to renegotiate so that we start seeing some paid back on our materials there, so it isn't just a cost out endeavor, which it has been up until now. And then we'll be performing a comprehensive analysis of our rubbish and recycling programs, which you'll see in the strategic priorities, to address issues such as unpaid carts, overfilled carts, carts not out, that type of thing. It's become more of a problem as time has gone on with people shifting carts. They move around. They just give their cart to their neighbor who puts it out. A lot of overfilled carts, and that's all revenue since it's a millage paid by taxpayers, that's other taxpayers paying for certain residents to get more rubbish than they're entitled to. So you'll see that going forward, our efforts there to make sure that we're keeping that process or the solid waste part of our operation cost effective, especially with the tipping fees going up. We need to make sure that we're getting the revenue per the current ordinance, and we may even come back with some adjustments to that. Budget is 2.8 million, which is basically flat, but this may change depending on how negotiations go with Granger. And everybody's favorite, the Water and Sewer Fund. This obviously funds our water distribution system. The water treatment facility is a partnership. It's an authority between Meridian Township and East Lansing, and one of us, we alternate sitting on the board every year. But it also funds the sewer collection system and the water resource recovery facility. Funding from that is primarily water and sewer rates that people pay. And then at the WRF, MSU pays 40% of the capital costs of projects, and the operations and maintenance costs are based on the percentage of flow. Meridian Township pays 33.3% of the WRF capital costs, and again, operations and maintenance is based on percentage of flow. Both of them also have shared sewers, because at some point the sewers combine, like along Timber Lane between Meridian Township and East Lansing. Both sets of flow go in there. So there's several shared sewers, and those are the maintenance and capital costs are based on percentage of flow between MSU, Meridian, and East Lansing. And the Whittingham Pump Station is also shared with Meridian Township because their flow from Tower Gardens north of Lake Lansing Road comes in there. Risk to water and sewer is average consumption's actually dropped over time. We used to our average user was 12,000 gallons. Now it's dropped down to 11,000 gallons, and that's just the newer housing stock is obviously way more efficient. And over time, more and more people with older housing stock replace their toilets and fixtures with lower use fixtures, which decreases revenue. And then also the reduction in development. There was a lot of investment made in the northern tier to extend utilities, and since the 2008 downturn, things have slowed significantly up there, so not as many people buying into the system and helping share that cost. And again, I circle back to the Water Authority. That split O&M and capital cost about 43.84% East Lansing and 56.16% Meridian Township. We use asset management plans to inform our water, sewer, and WRF design and construction projects, as well as our utility maintenance activities. And also the meter shop is housed here, which is they go out and read everybody's meter and generates water and sewer billing, and that's one of our big projects is to upgrade that so that we can potentially go to monthly billing and then put more of the usage in the hands of our users so they can see their usage. Challenges is an aging utility system. Lots of things need work around town, and trying to balance that also with street projects. This year was a super cold winter, and our main breaks were about 178% of the average. We averaged somewhere in the upper 40s to 50, and we had over 80 this year. And then changing weather, as everybody's noticed, these systems were built, especially the combined sewer system, for a different time, and all of these systems were on a different design storm, different weather patterns. So we have to, the combined sewer portion of the sewer system is funded with sewer funds, and that's a challenge going forward. Is not just looking at condition, but also the upsizing that's needed. The city made the decision back in the early 90s to do a storage solution to our CSOs, which is the tunnel down Grand River and the retention treatment basin and out at Kalamazoo and Harrison, instead of doing a full-blown separation like Lansing did to meet the EGLE requirements at the time. And I'm guessing nobody anticipated the storm events that we're getting with the frequency we're getting now and what impact that would have on the residents remaining on the combined sewer system. So that's one of the challenges going forward as well. Budget here is just over $53 million, a 17.8% increase, and primarily, again, due to capital projects. Next slide. And just a little bit about rates. We have a rate model that was developed in 2008, and we've had it updated the last 2 years by a consultant. It's made up of 3 distinct parts. First, new users that come in pay a capital connection fee, or connection fee, which is buying into the system. They're buying into the system that they're connecting into, and it's based on meter size, because the larger the meter, the more capacity that we're agreeing to give them in both the water and sewer system. And then the administration, it's the monthly bill is an administrative charge, which is the fixed charge to cover cost of reading meters and preparing bills. That doesn't go away every month. That's not dependent on usage. And then the readiness to serve charge, which is your fixed charges, which is your capital costs and your debt service. So if everybody stops using water tomorrow, you still have to pay your debt service. You still have to invest in the system because it gets a year older every year. So that's why the administrative and readiness to serve are a fixed charge and are not dependent on water use. And then there's the commodity charge, which is the variable cost, which is the maintenance of the system, the operation of the treatment plant. That's based on how much water comes through the system. So that's how the bill is divided up. So as we do more capital projects, that readiness to serve piece, that fixed piece, will start increasing, and you'll see that in the rates over the past few years, and this year is no different. Our total fund, or total increase for this year for the average user, there's in this table, there's 6,000, 11,000, 15,000, and 18,000 gallon users. The 11,000 is our average residential user. It's about a 4.3% increase, or just under $11 a quarter. And then we're comparing to our neighboring communities, we're right in the middle. We're the 6th. All we can do is compare our 27 proposed rates to everybody's existing rates. So this is our 27 rates to everybody's current 26 rates, and we're 6th on the list, which puts us right in the middle. A lot of the communities that charge more are older systems like ours. A lot of the ones that charge less are newer systems, so it makes sense where we're at. So I'm comfortable with where we are at rate-wise. And then just a slide showing kind of all the pieces of the pie. Oops, sorry, next slide. And this is the conclusion. If you want to know where all the pieces of the pie are, there it is. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions for Ron? Mr. Whalen.
First of all, I really, really appreciate many people enjoy their lives in East Lansing because of what you do on a day-by-day basis, and also all of your staff, incredibly ready to serve, so I really, really value the many, many aspects that you really help add to the lives. So first run at this is my, just a few issues. On the page 50, on that consolidated budget, a few items have pretty huge increases, and help me to understand. The three, if we can have a little bit more information on the capital improvement, then the automobile parking system, and then the sewage disposal system. I think what you said is the sewage disposal system, it's got a 24% increase. That is going to be shared with Meridian and Campus and...
Correct. Those are primarily the 2 big SRF projects,
Right.
and the project at the WRF will be split with Meridian Township and MSU, and the CSO project in Cedar Village is shared with Meridian Township,
So
and
we'll
a
have
portion to
some-
MDOT as well.
So we'll have some income to counteract that.
Yes, there is.
And then the
Revenue.
automobile parking system, it's a increase of almost $4 million.
That one's not me. That's parking.
Okay. And then the capital improvement funds, that is not you either?
I think that's later in the agenda, correct?
Yeah, so there's a combination between the capital projects, improvement projects overseen by DPW, and what is managed by Parks and Recreation for not only parks and recreation facilities, but city facilities, be it Hannah, fire stations, Valley Court, Community Center, City Hall, et cetera.
So that's, listen, I looked for that through the budget. I was trying to find, where that would be in this.
So the capital improvement plan that you have in your online agenda, and also, is it in the binder? No, so it's on your packet for tonight's
I
agenda.
looked and looked for that.
What's that?
I looked and looked for that, so.
So,
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking for the low-hanging fruit, the big items.
yeah, so I think the parking one was in part the fall prevention that is hopefully
That's what I
going to
thought.
be funded by grants. I think it was right around $3.4 million. And then some ongoing improvements done to parking facilities that they need to do every so many years, be it addressing the deterioration of any of the concrete or other elements of it. And I don't know if Jennifer Lacoste wants to go into any more detail, but generally, that's what that number, the dollar amount you identified.
So that's the 3 million, I think, because it's a 6 million, the fall prevention's a $6 million bill.
So the fall prevention is
3,000
only
hopefully.
3.4 million. The other 3.1 million is really capital improvements that are undertaken
Right.
every so many years. And it's being used as a match for the federal funding that we're seeking.
That we're hoping for.
Yes.
Thank you. So, yeah, I guess maybe it's then the capital improvement is the biggest jump from 3.1 to 12.2. I guess that'll be listed out. It's listed on the online.
So on the online, I started glancing at it. It starts on, give me 1 second. Here is the capital improvement program document, its draft form being presented to City Council as is consistent with our practice and will be formally adopted as part of the budget in a separate resolution. But let me get the first page. Yes.
I'll be addressing that in a few minutes.
All right. So starts on page 23 of 85
Okay.
in your online packet.
Thank you.
And so there's a bunch of narrative. You really want to focus on the spreadsheets that are reflected in that, and they're broken down by buildings or major local streets or water and sewer. And so that will be coming up, and we could dovetail into that now. If you want to jump into the capital improvements, I can invite Justin Dranke up.
I don't want to redirect where we're heading, so we can still
Well,
go where
it's
we need to go.
it's a tag team between Ron on any DPW and then Justin on any, again, parks and recreation or facilities.
Let's cycle back to capital later. Other questions for Ron? Anything, Chuck? Mark, anything? So I have a few questions, just in order that they sort of occurred to me. So you mentioned that with sort of a closer look at the allocation, now that you have a budget analyst, is there a chance that that could end up reducing burden on the general fund by charging costs out to other funds?
Yeah, there's certainly that potential of depending on where they perform their work in a given year. A lot of it's project driven.
Yep. Because I could imagine that the default is always to go to the general fund, right? Unless you take a step to allocate it somewhere else.
That's what we want to make sure isn't happening
Yep.
is just by default charge general engineering and or whatnot.
Yep.
So that's what we want to make sure isn't happening.
Parks maintenance, I wrote this question and then you sort of cycled back to it. So it sounds like you're looking for ways to reduce maintenance in the parks. And you
Correct.
mentioned the landscaping
Yep.
and so forth, and switching to native plantings and so on and so forth. So it sounds like, and you also mentioned this at the financial health team. It sounds like that's sort of an ongoing project.
Absolutely.
And then related to that, you had 15 staff at one point, now you have 11. Are they doing the same amount of work, or are they doing less work due to tech advances, or more work because there's more parks?
Yeah, I mean, I can't.
All of the above?
All of the above.
It's we're spread pretty thin,
Yeah.
and I mean, I still, I worked with the previous supervisor who retired years and years ago, and he always gives me an earful of things that we're not doing as well as he used to do. And I'm like, the city ended at Lake Lansing Road when you worked here, and you had, 4 or 5 more staff and a dedicated supervisor. So it's, what we're doing at hand is a good example of if we tailor the landscaping towards the front of the building, and we can reduce the maintenance and make the whole facility look better. We're not looking to have everything be turf, but we're hoping to more tailor it to the site and dial it back so that we can, nobody likes to run around with their head cut off and not feel good about the product that they're leaving behind, and that's the challenge, is not having staff, kind of feel like you're not doing a good job. Oh, yeah, and obviously other divisions, everybody backs each other up, so
Yep.
it's not just parks maintenance doesn't just do parks maintenance. When there's big events, we staff, all our divisions are staffed for average day. So every time there's a, large rain event, everybody's out clearing catch basins,
Yep.
and everybody's, so it's a lot of working outside of your home division, depending on the what's needed. Art festival will take, most of the staff for several days to set up and tear down and all that stuff for that. So it's also those type of things.
When was it that you had 15 again? So now you're at 11. When was it that you had
2010.
2010.
It really, you'll see the drop across all divisions when the results of the 2008 downturn.
Yeah, that's what I was
when
thinking.
we started seeing the tax reductions, and the service really started to dip because there just wasn't the money to do it. There wasn't money to buy the stuff to do it. Therefore, we didn't need the people to do it. So but then everything kind of came back after the 2008 downturn, and people want us to do the stuff again, only the people didn't come with it. So that's the trend
Yep.
that you see.
And I want to just take this chance to echo a point that it's probably pretty important to echo. We've been whittling away at public safety and public works for almost 20 years now, and we're asking you to do more with less. And this is why across-the-board budget cuts aren't going to work, because we've been cutting core functions for years.
And not without service reductions.
Without service reductions, without noticeable service reductions. I want to echo, Steve's comment. You guys do amazing stuff to grease the skids for everybody else, and we just can't keep cutting. We just can't do that. And this is why when people propose across-the-board budget cuts, it just shows that they aren't familiar with the history of the city. I read somewhere, I think in the documents, that Eastwood Town Center sends its outflow to the wharf.
It does. There's an agreement. Their sewer flow comes to the city, correct? So we get the water consumption from the board, because it's board water and light water.
Yeah.
And then we bill the sewer rate.
Okay, so we bill
Correct.
Eastwood for
Yes.
that? So we get recovery from the cost
Correct.
recovery from it, okay. Tipping fees, if tipping fees go up, our millage isn't going to go up, right? Are we looking ultimately at moving from the solid waste millage to a fee that could track?
But there's already a fee. You get up to a 64-gallon cart for free. If you want a 96-gallon cart as a normal residential user, you pay just over $100 annual fee. Now, whether that fee continues to go up, but again, part of that is when you have a 64-gallon cart's worth of trash heaped out of your 96-gallon cart, you're kind of getting trash for free. So we're looking to see if there's ways of collecting revenue from those who are actually using more than their fair share, as well as unbilled carts if people have inherited carts from their neighbors that moved away and that type of thing. We know that happens because we find it. So it's a process that we need to go through, but we'll look to do that first, and obviously increasing recycling is part of that effort. Reduce trash if we can renegotiate with the regional recycling facility, so we start getting credits back. We already get revenue for tin and cardboard, but start getting some rebates on some of the other items through that, and we can increase curbside and other means of recycling that also reduces that. So we're it's, sort of driving that. The cost increase proposal by Granger isn't driving that. It's something we want to do anyway. It just adds some motivation to look at that sooner.
You mentioned that we've now got the downtown lead worker is paid for by the DDA, right?
Correct.
Do we have two other workers that are in the downtown full-time?
We've always had, again, by full-time, it's their home division, but it doesn't mean they stay down there. They're down there to, they show up at 5:30, and their goal is to clean up any mess from overnight, so people showing up, at 7:30 don't know what happened the night before type of thing.
They do an amazing job. They
but
just do an amazing job.
If you see those people, it's a thankless job because everything you did the day before gets undone, especially on weekend nights.
Yeah.
But they also cycle to, City Hall, Hannah, the library, and there's still going to have to be some play as to where the work divides up between what leaves parks maintenance and what goes to downtown, because the downtown team isn't fully, the DDA agreed to fund it, but they also do ground trash and like parking structures, and that gets billed to parking, so part of it automatically goes there. A part of it also when you're downtown is Bill Sharp Park. There's sidewalks. There's other things downtown that aren't general fund necessarily. So it's like everybody else. They're not all of their expense is there. We bill based on a work order system. So where exactly that ends up laying out will depend. And then does the DDA want increased service for their increased funding? And I know the proactive piece of what we haven't done, as far as fixing bike racks, benches, that type of thing, that slipped through the cracks. I know they're expecting that, but where else that goes, I don't know.
So that's where I was going with this, is are we getting cost recovery from the DDA for all the stuff that the city does for them? And that's all under the umbrella of the municipal services agreement, is that right?
Correct.
So that billing is done pretty accurately, and they're pulling their weight.
It is. That's a number we provide to them, and they budget for it, and we get that amount once a month, or 1/12 of it every month. So it's that we get, for sure.
And then in terms of sewer fees and infrastructure, could we be more aggressive? So it sounds like the CSO tunnel might have been the wrong strategy, right? 30 years ago.
Hindsight, yes.
In hindsight. But
it met a requirement at the time.
And prediction is hard, especially about the future, right? So they did what they thought was right. But now we're in a situation where, after the rain event 2 or 3 weeks ago, every other driveway in my neighborhood had a truck in it the next morning because their sewer's surcharged, right? So this is a big issue, and it's not going to get any less big. Could we be more aggressive with sewer separation and just put the money on sewer fees?
Certainly we can, and we can look at raising sewer rates more aggressively to ramp up projects. But that hits that fixed charge that, some people will say hits your more, because that fixed charge, if you look at that chart that I provided on that on the slide, the percent increase is more for the lower water user, because that fixed fee that comes with capital projects keeps going up. We debt fund a lot of that through SRF because it's a low interest loan and lets us get more project done.
Was this on your radar, potentially becoming more aggressive with sewer separation in reaction to the weather events that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think that's certainly something we have to consider, and the piece that's going to dovetail into that is the wet weather resiliency plan, because some of that overlaps in certain areas and is recommending improvements in some of our CSO areas as well. And then there's the other side of some of our separate areas are pretty wet. The flow, whether it's footing tiles, whether it's sump pumps, that type of thing, and we've never done, in my time here, a program where we try to eliminate some of those connections that are easier to eliminate. Footing tiles are tough, sump pumps are easier, that type of thing, to try to dry up the separate system, because it's easy to just take your sump pump and tie it into your sanitary sewer line in the house, that type of thing, roof gutters, that type of thing. So there's lots of different ways of trying to reduce that, but it all takes funds, and there's a balance between what people can pay.
Would that kind of stuff be something that you could pay out of the sewer fund, or would that require a stormwater utility?
The stormwater component of it, I mean, a lot of the work out of the wet weather resiliency plan is is not fundable through sewer. It's storm sewer stuff. So we're going to have to come up with a way to fund that moving forward. If there's CSO component, then we can pay for it out of the sewer fund, and the SRF is eligible for that. And there is if you have this asset management plan, which we're working on, there is a stormwater SRF program as well that will now be eligible for but we still got to make the payments with general fund dollars. So there's a lot of stuff that's got to move forward, but we're positioning ourselves to be competitive for that because not a lot of places have this plan that we've been developing.
So the sooner we can get access to those funds, the better, potentially. So, I mean, I think if you go around and ask people whether they would rather have their sewer rates maintained at the same level or go up and have a chance that their basement isn't going to get surcharged with sewage, I think they're probably going to prefer to, have the problem fixed. And the problem, of course, is that these events occur maybe once or twice a summer, and then they leave a scar, and then people forget about them, right? And so we, I think, have a responsibility to keep momentum on these things. And if we know what their trajectories are in terms of storm intensity and so forth, we need to be looking at all things, not just the stormwater utility, but also, in my mind, getting more aggressive with separation.
Yeah,
projects.
because that's an important part of combined sewer is no matter how much upsizing we do, let's say we upsize all the combined sewers to a 50-year storm. Well, that means anything bigger than that, it's still going to surcharge. There's no way to say it's not going to happen. There's always going to be a storm bigger. So that's when you're in a combined sewer system, it's not if, it's when and how often. So that's just the nature of that. And
so it really is separation that we have to be looking at.
I mean, to work on towards elimination, that's, and I'm gonna come back to you shortly with a update to our backup prevention program for backflow preventers and that type of thing as well.
And then last question was really pretty small. On the administration fees, on the fee schedule, there's one guy who always asks me, why is there a fee both on sewer and water? And my answer to him was always, well, they just take the total fee and divide it in half, but that's not the way it works. So could you briefly explain how those administration fees get computed, if you know off the top?
Yeah, I mean, it's more or less the admin fees, but the rate model is very complicated. It's a multi-page spreadsheet that calculates, and that admin fee, it's actually calculated separately.
Okay.
And so the admin fee is based on running the water side of the model, the sewer rate side of the model, and how much of the admin fee should go towards each, depending on the dollar figure, the allocation. So it's a complicated way of saying it's splitting the fee, but based on the allocation of water and sewer.
Okay.
So it would be, if you wanted it lumped together, it'd still be the same fee. It would just be an admin fee, but it'd be the two of them combined.
Okay. So I guess the short answer is it's complicated. Right.
It's not straight.
Yeah.
Oh, there's sewer staff and there's water staff.
The whole
Sewer fund and a water
Could you
fund.
turn on your mic?
Oh,
it's on. You just got to lean forward.
do I have to? Okay.
You just
There's
have to-
sewer staff and there's water staff and infrastructure and projects, and they're different funds.
Okay.
So, when you go to those pages, they're separate funds.
Got it.
So the revenue needs to come in to cover the expense that's in this fund versus this fund.
Got it. Okay, so it's really tied to the work done in each of the two,
Yeah.
in service of each of the two funds.
Right.
Okay.
It's a 10-year model that you put in the entire budget for sewer, entire budget for water, all the capital projects projected out. So it takes everything into account in both funds to come up with that projection, and then it tries to smooth it so we're not doing 3% this year and 20% next year, that type of thing.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
No, I appreciate the questions that you brought forth, and I really appreciate this department. And I know you're working really hard to try to make it all work with less, and I appreciate that. appreciate this lady coming in and making your life easier as well. So,
Lifesaver.
It's good to hear. Okay, great. Thank you. I think we are on now to Parks and Rec, and then we'll do some tag teaming with capital improvements when the time comes. Director Dranke, welcome.
Good evening, council members. Let me pull that a little bit closer. Okay. Good evening, council. My name is Justin Dranke, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Arts, and I also oversee government buildings. Before I jump into the Parks and Recreation Fund this evening, I want to first acknowledge the hardworking department staff for not only all of the work that they do all year long, but their extra work, particularly going into this budget year, helping coach me through all of the intricacies of their programs. I asked them to do a lot more work, give me a lot more information, and they, exceeded the mark. So I want to acknowledge specifically Heather Mahano, Jim Jennings, Tim Lane, Dana Kilponen, Lois Fogarty, Julianne Jennings, Kathleen Miller, Colleen Armitage, and Carlos Barajas. And I think that I'd like to give a special thanks to Jane Stone, not only for her exceptional work kind of putting everything together for this budget, but also for keeping me on schedule. So could not have done this without Jane's hard work on the budget. Also want to say thank you to both Audrey and Mary in Finance for their detailed review of all of the funds that we oversee. So tonight I would like to start with the Parks and Recreation Fund, which starts on page 181 in your budget document. Okay, so to start with, the slide on the screen is really intended to give a high-level overview, kind of that 30,000 foot in the air perspective of the Parks and Recreation Fund for 2027, and really shows how kind of the different categories of both revenue and expenditures compare to previous fiscal years. Overall, compared to fiscal year 26, our budget for fiscal year 27 is expected to decrease by 3.4%, or again a decrease of 212,000. A couple of the key points on that make up the difference. One would be charges for services is down just over 300,000. Two big programs that we stopped administering in fiscal year 26. First being the middle school sports program for East Lansing Public Schools, as well as the All of Us Express Children's Theater will be moving on to their own nonprofit as of May 18th. Rental income overall is showing up about 68,000. A big piece of that would be ensuring that all space rental users here at the Hannah Community Center are paying a standard rate. There were kind of some agreements previously that certain programs might get a discount, or there were certain users that would get kind of a slightly reduced rate, but really wanting to make sure that we track the true program cost across all programs and users, and that we establish that standard rate across the board. As a part of doing that, the current budget shows a general fund transfer amount decreasing by $24,000 because we are eliminating a space rental discount that was previously offered to the Primetime Seniors program. A portion of the general fund that kind of equates to what we would see the impact of space rental revenues. It will then go from our fund over to the seniors fund. Grants, community sport, and other is up by about 45,000. The big story with that component would be that we will be recognizing a portion of the school age care out of school time grant in fiscal year 27 for the expenditures that will be spent in fiscal year 27. So the grant that we have for our before and after school care program follows the state fiscal year, which does not align perfectly with the city's fiscal year, and so we have to recognize a portion of that in the upcoming fiscal year 27. On the expenditure side of things, personnel services is currently showing down $122,000. With that, I have frozen the assistant director position for 1 year while we figure out the implementation of the wage and job study and really figure out what that position will need to be and what gaps in skills and future planning for the department leadership will need to look like. And operating costs are down $89,000, again, largely to the departure of All of Us Express Children's Theater and transitioning middle school sports back to the school district. The other thing that you will see throughout the budget document is the implementation of a recreation and culture indirect cost allocation. And this is really to kind of give a picture of, rather than having all of the administration costs sit in a separate administration division, really to show kind of what that overhead looks like by each of our divisions within the Parks and Recreation Fund, so that you can start to see maybe what the true cost of each program is that we administer. And then what is not included in here, but what was included in the separate memo, were 3 requests to reclassify or adjust 3 positions. And I just wanted to acknowledge that those would not have any impact on the general fund, that those would be contained fully within the Parks and Recreation Fund if we are able to move forward with those. And on the next slide, please. The other part that I have prepared for the Parks and Recreation Fund on the slideshow is a history of the transfer from the general fund to the Parks and Recreation Fund. And what I've called out specifically are some of the large variances in that amount. So fiscal year 27 transfer amount represents 43% of our fund revenues. Historically, the highest kind of share of revenues came from the general fund transfer during the COVID pandemic. Certainly we had this facility closed for a portion of that time. We couldn't run many of the programs in the same way. It made sense that we didn't have as much program revenues coming in. And prior to the introduction of the general government indirect cost allocation and transferring the community events programs into the Parks and Recreation Fund, we averaged around 30% of our revenue came from the general fund subsidy. There were 2 places where the general fund support was used specifically for facility improvements, both in fiscal year 2018 and 2020. I wanted to call that out specifically because those are the types of projects that are now supported with the income tax revenues. And so you would see projects like that reflected either in the Capital Improvement Fund or the Parks Capital Improvement Fund, which we'll talk about in a few moments. And then the other component that I just wanted to cover at the high-level overview before I'm happy to answer any questions on the Parks and Recreation Fund was looking at the strategic priorities that are included in the budget document. And one of the items that we've identified is establishing a cost recovery program and hopefully decreasing the need for general fund support for our programs. And I want to call that out specifically because at the same time, I believe that equity and financial accessibility are important, and it'll be important to continue to identify opportunities for scholarships in order to ensure that our programs can remain financially accessible. We currently have multiple scholarship funds, including we have a Roundup for Scholarships program, so if you were to sign up for a class and maybe you wanted to round up $2 to an even $20, we can use that as a scholarship fund. We also receive some funding from CDBG for program scholarships. And I will pause there to answer questions about the Parks and Recreation Fund.
Questions for the director? You mentioned briefly a cost, just toward the end, you were saying about the cost recovery program. Could you say what you said again, please?
Yeah, so one of the recommendations in the strategic priorities, which I can tell you the exact page number, that says personnel. So that would be on page 16, and I'm looking at goal 4 under financial stability.
Okay.
And that would be to reduce transfer from general fund to the Parks and Recreation Fund, and part of that would be to establish a cost recovery policy where we kind of look at program by program, what is the expectation for those programs to have cost recovery from fees versus what is something that the city is willing to subsidize.
Yep.
And I look at that, I consider that in the concept of, is something in an individual benefit or is something have a larger community-wide benefit?
Yep, and that will presumably drive questions about whether certain programs are sustainable.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Great. That's great. think, forge ahead, unless there are any more questions.
So you're going to hit on the Parks Capital Improvement Fund?
Yes, and then I'll get to the capital
Okay.
improvement fund as well.
I'll be
Okay. All right, we can move ahead to the Parks Capital Improvement Fund. And if you want to go to the one slide after that, please. Same format of the kind of high-level overview of the Parks Capital Improvement Fund. In your budget document, this starts on page 249. So for the Parks Capital Improvement Fund, this is where we would budget for kind of our large-scale park and trail improvement projects. And the interesting thing about these projects is they don't neatly fit into one fiscal year. We're talking about construction that, you know, happens in the spring, summer, maybe early fall, which of course is perfectly bisected by changing over to the fiscal year. And so sometimes we do have to estimate what's going to be fully constructed by June 30th, what's going to linger into the next fiscal year, and do some projection on what carries forward year to year. But included in the fiscal year 27 budget, on the revenue side of things, we do see some decreasing in the grants, community support, and other. And the big piece of that was we had planned to use some of the fund balance in fiscal year 26 that were not then carrying that same use of fund balance into fiscal year 27. A part of that was just revenues coming in for fiscal year 25 that we then end up spending the project on fiscal year 26. So that's where you'll see the reappropriated equity or the use of fund balance, both sides of that kind of go up and down year to year because these projects don't neatly fit into one fiscal year.
Which makes it tricky to sort of track spending.
Yes, it does,
Right.
which is why why I look at our tracking by project, right? And so kind of seeing how that investment looks at maybe the different parks, different trails, that kind of thing. Or, you know, we could look at trying to smooth that and figure out where, you know, what is the 5-year average kind of thing, or really looking at the funding side of things as far as the funds that the city puts into those projects, separate from any grants that we receive. That might be a more reliable way to kind of track the city's investment in those pieces as far as a, you know, medium or long-term trend. What we do see in the grants and community support for fiscal year 27 includes receiving some funds from the Natural Resources Trust Fund grant that we have for the Northern Tier Trail Extension, as well as CDBG funding, both for the trail extension by the soccer complex, as well as a recommended project to realign the trail by the fire station. And the income tax allocation is budgeted just over $851,000. That's up $225,000. That's a big portion of that is due to the compliance efforts that have been undertaken to really receive those income tax funds. And that amount really is determined by what's coming in. It's not driven by, here's the project that we're going to do, but rather what's the 20% that comes in that has to be dedicated to infrastructure, and how does that get split between streets and sidewalks? Currently, about 8% is dedicated toward facilities, parks, and trails. The other thing that you'll see on there is bond proceeds, so that is identified for recreation facility parking lots. So that would be the parking lots for the soccer complex as well as the aquatic center and softball complex. That was one of the projects that was on the list that we discussed at the March 10th discussion-only meeting. Happy to talk a little bit more about some of those projects as we talk about the capital A and expenditures on the next slide. So the first image that you see on that slide is the Northern Tier Trail by Fire Station. So this is would be a new project that we introduce in fiscal year 27. This is recommended for funding by the CD Advisory Committee for CDBG funding in the upcoming fiscal year. And this is a project where I was approached by the fire chief that what he's seeing more and more is conflict where the trail overlaps with their driveway. And while the picture on the slide is staged, that is a frequent occurrence where the emergency vehicles often need to wait for pedestrians to clear out of the way because the trail currently overlaps with that fire station driveway. So we've identified that we would need to basically construct the trail off of that driveway in order to mitigate that conflict. The other piece, the parking lots, we had originally expected to span both fiscal year 26 and 27, but based on kind of the expected timeline of when those would work best for those facilities, those projects really would all appear as expenditures in fiscal year 27. And the image on the slide shows kind of the current condition in some of the areas of those parking lots. The other thing that we are able to include in this project is building an accessible pathway to the dog park. Right now, it's a kind of a gravel walkway. We would be able to include paving that with an accessible pathway as part of that project. We have funding included in the fiscal year 27 budget for Lucia Ungaro Fox Park that would help with neighborhood engagement and planning for future installation of park amenities and or low maintenance native landscaping. There's also some funds for some natural improvements in parks, including potentially Exotica Park habitat improvements, as well as pond water quality restoration in Albert A. White Park. We've identified playground equipment and park amenities, potentially Robert Shaw Park, for improvements to the play equipment in that park, as well as continuing work on the Valley Court Park improvement master plan and connectivity plan. That is kind of an ongoing collaboration with the DDA as far as it relates to the connectivity plan. And really that next step would be additional community engagement to develop kind of a more detailed phased construction plan and specifications to really identify here's what exactly would need to happen first so that we could then pursue grant funding in an upcoming cycle. Other projects that are not pictured on the slide but are included in the narrative would be the Northern Tier Trail extension to from the soccer complex to Coolidge Road, as well as fence repairs around the Hannah Community Center or Britton Field, and then an allowance for individual amenity repairs that, as well as needed architect or engineering services and labor costs for DPW engineering staff to do inspections for active projects. So that is the Parks Capital Improvement Fund. Would you like me to move on to the Capital Improvement Fund as well, or do you have questions on this part?
I just had a real brief point about the Valley Court connectivity plan. You said that's ongoing. And then as you go along, you have to have community engagement to kind of go about that. So is there not a full gauged idea of what that's going to end up being like right now, or is that just where you gotta get the community engagement part to kind of really go forward with the direction?
Yeah, so what we have is we have an approved kind of master plan for the park. So we have, we went through a community engagement process where we kind of said, what would you like to see in the park? What kind of things are important to you to see in that park? And where do those kind of fit in? And so we have kind of what I would call a rough sketch of, these are the things that we'd want to see in the park. But what we haven't done is like construction drawings or identifying which part of this would make sense to build first, right? If you're talking about a full-scale park renovation, but you don't have the funding to do maybe the entire park all at once, what part would make sense to do first in order to kind of get that out of the way so that you could then build another part of that second, and really kind of have some more exact level of detail, right? So one of the things, for example, that's on the master plan is to include an amphitheater in the park. But it doesn't say exactly what size. It doesn't say exactly what all of these things look like, right? What kind of roof shape or those kind of pieces. And that would be kind of that next level of starting to fill in some of those details. So I guess the best way to say that is we have a coloring page, we have the outline, but we haven't started filling in the colors on it.
And that, the funding from that originally came from where? How did that work, the connectivity part of it?
So that was a collaboration where the Valley Court redevelopment plan for the park itself came through the Parks Capital Improvement Fund using income tax dollars. It was a collaboration with the Downtown Development Authority, who was focused on the corridor and the street improvements that would lead people from kind of along Albert to the park. So there's a collaborative funding piece there.
Okay. That's the piece I was missing. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just a couple of questions.
Yes.
So 1.5 million for parking lot improvements, right, at the recreation facilities. Is there any chance that we can recoup that through fees?
Yes. And we had a bid opening a couple hours ago, and I'm
Okay.
pleased to tell you that the total cost is going to be much less than that.
Okay.
Base bid on those was about 1.1.
And then the idea would be to fund that with bond proceeds,
Mhm.
but then allocate those charges to fees.
To those
recoup-
facilities,
To
yes.
those facilities. And then that would dovetail with the cost recovery program to try to figure out how we can avoid transfers from the general fund. Do I have that logic approximately
You
correct?
absolutely have that logic exactly right. And
Okay.
I'm just pulling up that exact, roughly, for example, it would be maybe $26,000 to $28,000 a year for the aquatic center that they would then recover through their user fees. So they'd have to make up that amount on their users who visit that facility.
Right.
Which ultimately, if you talk about a per visit cost, it's less than $1 per visit.
So that's very helpful context, actually, because I wasn't sure how all the pieces fit together. But that's reassuring, because when I see 1.5 million for parking lots, I think, do we really need a new parking lot? And I understand, pavement deteriorates, right? But I'm glad to know that we can pay for it from the fees paid by the users of those. The realigning the northern tier trail by the fire station.
Certainly.
I imagine if that truck parked there were to blow its horn, those people would scatter. But I guess that's not the kind of thing we want to rely on in that sort of situation.
Well,
I'm looking for quick fixes to expensive
yeah,
problems.
the easy quick fix is to repaint the line that says here's where you're supposed to be, or you've seen
Yep.
maybe some of those temporary barricades that maybe get glued down where they're kind of identifying here is a bike path or whatever, and it might just be like an orange fiberglass kind of stake or whatever. That could be kind of a shorter term solution to say let's clearly demarcate what is pathway versus driveway, although I would certainly need to run that through the fire chief to make sure that we weren't taking away the maneuverability of their driveway. So I think there's both kind of the short term, here's what you could do right away, as well as really trying to identify what's the best solution longer term.
Yeah, I sure don't want to stand in the way of the right solution to a real problem.
Sure.
But, and I'm not interested in nickel and diming anything. It's just the question did occur to me. And then going back to your presentation on the Parks and Rec Fund, I had a question about the OST grant. Is that ending, or is that a continuing grant?
So the grant is one that we received, and I want to say that we received notice of that in either late November or December. And that grant period goes through September 30th. So this is the third time that we have received that grant.
Okay.
But it is a competitive application every time. And from what I understand, unless they change the program requirements moving forward, after you have received that 3 times, there's a score penalty for future applications, so you are less likely to receive that in future years.
Because that covers a significant part of the cost of that
Yes.
program.
Yes, a big component of that is that the grant reimburses a part of the program fees to those families.
Oh, so we don't see the benefits directly.
We see some of the benefits directly, but it also benefits some of the families directly. But it does allow us to offer several additional programming, as well as covers the cost of some of the staff for those programs as well.
Is this something else that we could consider turning over to the school board?
I don't think that there's an appetite for that. But that would be a question for the school district. I will say that many communities run a before and after school program through Parks and Rec or a third-party nonprofit.
Okay. It seems like a third-party nonprofit might. I don't know. There's this line that I'm trying to find for myself about what businesses should we be in.
And some of the legacy of that program is that was part of the East Lansing Recreation and Arts nonprofit that was dissolved and merged into the city to create Parks, Recreation, and Arts in 2002. And so that had existed separately as a partnership, then a nonprofit between the city and the school district. And I don't have all of the context of exactly why that wasn't the best solution at that point in time, other than it made the most financial sense for that program to come into the city at that point.
Yep. Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions on this? Steve?
I do.
Steve
That
had-
does raise, I'm sorry.
Thank you. So I do appreciate, I can see where you've really tried to cut some expenses through a lot of these different categories, and these are tough days. And you're stepping in as, first of all, welcome. We're glad you're officially the director now.
Thank you.
And you've got amazing staff, just like DPW. I interact with quite a few of your staff, and I'm very, very impressed with their attitudes, their perspective, and they've got a high service mentality, and they have for many years. So I appreciate the many areas you've cut from even last year. I guess my big picture concern is having a budget without a bond. Because there's a lot of things I know that it would be really, really very helpful and wonderful to do. I'm just not sure if, and I think I'm an isolated voice in that argument, that right now, considering the vote last fall, and even though there's a lot of really valuable processes. So I don't know how, can we absorb some of the cost of some of the projects within the budget? I don't know that we are going to be able to do that, of all the different bond proposals. Again, like the fire department, I spent a lot of time in that back parking lot. It's not a parking lot that's really designed for the public.
Right.
There is several parking spots out front. I think, yeah, creative. I appreciate in so many ways you've really been very, very creative on trying to save costs. I guess, has that been a consideration? What happens if we would choose not to do? Maybe this is more for the city manager.
So are you
Not
inquiring
doing the
about
bond.
the Parks capital improvement projects? I just want to get some clarity.
Right.
Okay. So right now, fortunately, we've been very beneficial to receive a substantial allocation of income tax revenues based on how the charter says that those need to be distributed to infrastructure. And if we did not move forward with the bond issue for, at least for the parking lot project, all of the other projects that are identified in the Parks Capital Improvement Fund are income tax or grant funded. And if you look at the total available fund balance that's projected at the end of fiscal year 27 is about 1.5 million, which means that we could use kind of fund balance or, income tax dollars to pay for those parking lots separately from doing a bond issue.
Thank you.
Mark, you had some questions.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I'm glad we are talking about bonding because these capital improvement projects are capable of being bonded as opposed to using our other funds with regard to it. And it's up to the public then to decide what they want to do. We use the bonding to construct the aquatic center, the softball complex, and basically all of our other recreational opportunities within the community. And to the extent we need to maintain them, we can bond in order to do that. I think we just need to make that pitch to the public and see what they want to do. With regard to Valley Court Park, which is on your picture list anyway, we have a plan to improve that entire park.
Correct.
And the cost of that plan should be part of a bonding opportunity. I know you've limited it to the Valley Court Community Center, which I can't remember exactly, was built 1927, something like that. It was the original Public Works garage. So we've talked for a long time about redoing that entire property. And as part of a larger plan, I think it would be useful for us to talk to the public about what they'd like to see there, and not just put 350,000 more into a building that is old and requiring more and more money being put into it. So that's my reaction to that, although, we'll see how it goes during the budget process. And then I want to talk about before and after. I'll just note that when I came here, I came here with 3 kids. I was a single parent. We didn't have a before and after program. School district began the before and after program after a number of single parents approached the school board to talk about the opportunity to have that at the Bailey School. And I'll just note that in the first grade class of my son, I think there were 23 students in that class. 17 of us were single parents. So 17 of those students had a single parent. It was a critical need within our community at that time, and I continue to think it is at this particular time. So when we took over the program after SCAP and ELRA, we had a financial problem with. It was poorly managed, and the city took over all of those recreational efforts and created this great department that we have now. And we assumed the before and after program, which was at several locations by that point. So the whole idea of turning that back over to the school board, which probably can't afford to operate it, I think that is something that is expected to be operated by the city of East Lansing. It's certainly something that needs to be offered within our community. So I would be very resistant to us reducing or eliminating that program.
Chuck, any comments?
I just have a comment about you as the director and coming in and doing this presentation. I know I'm very impressed with everything I heard about you, and then you came in here ready to rock and roll and very thorough, and I appreciate that. And I know you take a lot of pride in doing a great job, and as the other council member says, about trying to make this thing work and keep this thing afloat. This department's dear to me, and to some of the comments that Councilmember Meadows said as far as the before and after program and how people benefit from that in our community. The whole area of what we do for programming, and I said in my very beginning that we're responsible for 3 things: infrastructure, public safety, and quality of life. And I think with a lot of the things that you are charged with and managing is part of our quality of life and our culture. And I think it's very, very important for us to be as creative as possible to keep as much as we can in a way that really is representative of who we are as a culture. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just had a couple of leftover questions. One was about installing amenities in parks.
Certainly.
So there was, for example, a plan to upgrade some amenities in Shaw Park, right? And we've put a bunch of stuff in Stoddard Park and various other parks. Once we install those things, we have to maintain them.
Yes.
Right, so that's an expense. And then there may be some additional maintenance that DPW has to pick up. So are we thinking along the lines of perhaps scaling back? So it's one thing to have a park. We want to keep our parks, right? Because we don't want to let them go away because then they're gone. But we can choose to put amenities in parks or not, depending on how affluent we're feeling in a particular time. So is it something that you're thinking about that maybe we need to scale back on amenities? Would that save us money, or would it not?
Potentially. What I'm thinking about is looking at the places where some of the existing amenities are 30 or 40 years old, and they're requiring substantial maintenance, and working very collaboratively with Public Works and the park maintenance team to identify what are the lower maintenance type of amenities that we could replace that with. Things that might still also be under manufacturer's warranty. I've had conversations with the GIS team at DPW about making sure that we put that on a calendar that says, hey, if the warranty is going to expire in 5 years, that we're out there at 4 years and 6 months inspecting it and getting every last warranty claim that we could to make sure that we're not, paying for any replacement parts after that period of time. And so I do think that you can have an existing level of amenities if you make smart choices about what those amenities are and if you choose the lower maintenance type of options. And that's a very collaborative process.
Okay. But I'm guessing you're also considering just pulling out amenities if it makes sense.
There are times where that might be the correct answer, depending on what the needs and of that type of park might be. And certainly communities and neighborhoods grow and change over the years, and if that park has not been upgraded in 40 years, the needs of today's neighborhood might be very different than what that park was designed for 40 years ago.
Right, and then I wanted to address the issue of bonding for maintenance, because my understanding is that bonding is for infrastructure, and that maintenance needs to be funded by other means, and I was going to ask the city manager to address that issue if he was able to.
Sure. Yes, the bond that we've talked about is for capital improvements in either public facilities or, as Justin indicated, the parking lot at the aquatic center. Typically have a useful life of 15 to 20 years, and so instead of cash flowing it, you try to spread the cost of making those improvements over the useful life and therefore not drain your reserves. Maintenance is something that we're funding through our annual operations.
And maintenance, of course, is what we tried to do with the millage, right? Because we can't bond for maintenance. And that's why we went with the millage, because we used bonds to build a bunch of infrastructure that we have now been maintaining out of the general fund that we can't afford to maintain out of the general fund. That was the basic logic there. Okay, onward to the Capital Improvement Fund.
Certainly.
All right.
All right, the Capital Improvement Fund, if you will go to the first chart in that slideshow, great. This will be page 241 in your budget document. Again, consistent format as far as what this kind of high-level overview of the fund looks like, but the big story on this, which we've already started to talk about, is that the fiscal year 27 budget does assume issuance of a general obligation limited tax bond to support facility improvements. An initial list of identified projects was presented at the March 10th discussion-only meeting. Other items that are in here, so the Capital Improvement Fund predominantly works to fund the infrastructure improvements for city-owned buildings and facilities. There's also a portion of this that is for the Avondale Square Brownfield Plan and that project. So you'll see kind of Avondale Square called out separately in the full chart in the document, separately from our facility projects. This is also the fund where we ran some of the ARPA funds for facility projects, which are now complete. So you'll see as those have fallen off, we've wrapped up those projects. Some of the ARPA-funded projects being complete will show decreases in the expenditures now. But the grants, community support, and other includes the Avondale Square Brownfield Plan, as well as a grant from the Michigan Arts and Culture Council for improvements to the theater here in the Hannah Community Center. The decrease that you see is due to reappropriated equity that was used in 2026. That was kind of the last bit of ARPA-funded projects. Now that those projects are done, we're not reappropriating those funds to expend in the previous fiscal year, so that's where that decrease in total other comes from. Transfer from the general fund is purely for the Avondale Square project. That's related to the Brownfield Plan projections. The income tax allocation, we don't have any transfer planned into the capital improvement fund for this upcoming fiscal year. Certainly, depending on how projects shape out, we could certainly move some of the income tax dollars from the park capital improvement fund into the capital improvement fund for specific projects in a future amendment. And then this then would include the bond proceeds. That's part of the discussion that we've been having already. The facility capital improvements would show up under the capital outlay. Debt service would represent the Avondale Square debt service as well as the bond issuance cost for that facility improvement bond. And then other operating costs are reappropriated equity for construction costs. So the other kind of important high-level overview of this is that the budget assumes that we issue the entire bond amount in fiscal year 2027, but realistically it will take across 3 fiscal years to construct all of those projects, and so not all of the expenditures are reflected. So a large portion of that will be held in fund balance for expenditure then in fiscal years 28 and 29. And if you could go to the next slide, it'll show that a little bit more. So what I did for this fiscal year 2027 budget is out of that list of projects that was in your agenda packet from the March 10th discussion only meeting, identified the highest priority projects or the things that really realistically could get done within fiscal year 2027. And that amounts to about $3.8 million in expenditures. Then I kind of show you fiscal year 28 would be about 4.9 and about 3.2 million in fiscal year 29. So that total bond issue that's included in the fiscal year 27 budget of the 12 million, not all of that gets spent in fiscal year 27. So you're really accounting for 3 years of spending in that first year, which is why when you look at that in brief on page 50 that you mentioned, it jumps up from 3 million to 12 million. It's because you're accounting for 3 years of projects in one revenue. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of the projects that are on here. Specifically, for City Hall, there are certain projects that are critical, and without doing debt financing or doing the facility bond, we would need to identify alternative funding. One of those being that the boiler at City Hall must be replaced before this upcoming winter. It's requiring basically daily intervention from our maintenance staff, and we need to replace that before it gets cold again. The elevator modernization projects that are identified for both City Hall and this building are a code requirement. If those projects are not complete by December 31st of 2027, we can't operate those elevators anymore. The generator at City Hall is currently operational. We do regular preventative maintenance, but based on the last assessment of that, it's only able to output about 80% of its rated capacity. So that's definitely something that we want to look at replacing, especially because it supports the Emergency Operations Center as well as the data systems for the city in order to make sure that those things can stay online. As well as looking at replacing the sump pumps that have exceeded their expected service life, putting those on a duplex system that is connected to emergency power to ensure that even if there were a power outage, that our sump pumps that work in the basement level of City Hall would still be functional. For here at the Hannah Community Center, looking at, again, boiler upgrades, the current boiler is 24 years old. It's at the end of its expected service life, so it's fortunately has not far exceeded how long we expect that to last, but it is at the point where it would definitely need to be replaced. Also would be looking at upgrading the building management system, the remaining parts that are on a pneumatic control, temperature controls, we would convert to digital control, which has the added benefit of being able to alert our maintenance staff when something is broken so that you don't come into your office in the morning and identify, oh, it's very cold in my office, because we would have already gotten that alert that something is wrong well before any user would even notice. Again, there's an elevator modernization project on here. The other piece is we would look at actually upgrading the generator and HVAC in one of the HVAC units for this building to really help the Hannah Community Center serve as a resiliency hub. We'd be looking at replacing the generator with a whole building unit that would really give us the power to kind of operate all of the rooms if there were a power outage, as well as replace the kind of HVAC unit that provides both heat and cooling for the executive conference room. That's the large conference room on the second story. And what's important about that is it provides one space that is cooled separately from the main chiller, right? If you think about this as a residential, it's like having one room of your house that's separately cooled from your main air conditioner. So if your main air conditioner goes down, you still have one space that's cooled that you can go to. It's important for us to kind of have that backup so that in the event of an extreme heat situation, we could operate a cooling center, and even if that main chiller went down, we'd have a backup space for that. So really that's about providing a level of service to the community, operating as a resiliency hub. And then continuing work through our roof asset management plan. There's different sections of roof area that are identified different periods of time. It's not like a residential house where you do all of your roof at the same time. We've got different areas that are different sizes at different elevations. One of the areas would be over the dance studio that's identified as being in poor condition and due for replacement. Other project we talked about briefly at the discussion meeting was the fire station, expanding and renovating those sleeping quarters and potentially rebuilding that parking lot, as well as work for the Valley Court Community Center. So, questions?
Questions? Mr. Grigsby.
Yes, thank you. And I don't want to sound like I'm nitpicking on some of this here, but I just really want to get a real feel for. So is the Hannah Center Community Service Elevator modernization, is that code generated for compliance, or is that? I mean, and then the hydraulic jack replacement is that code?
Yes.
Compliant? Okay.
Yeah, so if I may just give you a little bit more context.
Okay.
The state updated the elevator code. They adopted a new safety standard for elevators, and there's a phased implementation of different sections of that code. And the part that we need to make sure that we upgrade the elevators and comply with, the state gave all of the people who are operating existing elevators until December 31st of 27 in order to make those upgrades. So I think the rule officially went into effect in 2024. And there's a phased implementation of that, but it is code-driven.
Okay. Yeah, as I think in my mind in this discussion about prioritizing certain things and trying to get away with others, I try to, as the mayor was looking at ways to kind of really be creative with that. And then so the same thing is with the Valley Court replacement of the HVAC equipment and things like that. Or is that is that like an 80% situation where it's, how poor is it?
So that one is something that could be spread out a little bit longer. I think in the previous version of kind of our 5-year capital program, we identified spreading that out over 3 or 4 years. The reason that was kind of all lumped together in this was the idea of if you are going to bond finance some of your projects, if you kind of lump all of that into that one issue, you only have to pay that kind of setup charge one time, as opposed to if you are doing multiple issues. So say you issued a bond this year, and then you did another one the next year, and then you did another one the next year. Well, then you're paying the setup and servicing fees 3 times to kind of create that. And so as a part of trying to generate some maybe efficiency or economies of scale, really pulled all of those numbers into that one issue that really would cover the critical projects. I identified a 3-year expenditure for those, but really it would cover kind of the most critical projects within the next 3 to 5 years.
Thank you.
Further questions? Mark?
Just more of a comment, actually. But I think people should realize that if we do bond, let's say we bond for $12 million, then, that money goes into a separate account that we have to maintain with regard to the bond. We can invest that money. As it's used, it is pulled from the account. But that $12 million can end up being more than $12 million over the period of time that is actually used. In this case, over a 3-year period, we are likely to see some gain anyway that can offset some of the legal costs that were originally associated with it, and so that it's a better way of doing business if we're going to go in this bonding direction on this. So I just wanted to mention that.
Appreciate it. And this is my first go, so I apologize to the public. I'm learning as we go along, and I really appreciate like I said earlier about kind of what you're doing with us, and I appreciate my colleagues in asking some of the questions that I haven't got there just quite yet. So this is tremendous. I just want to get it right and be a positive force to our budget and come into answers at the end of the day. So thank you and your patience.
A couple of questions. The investment in the Valley Court Community Center, is that something we could recoup from leasing fees?
It could be, yes. So under the current agreement that we have with now Forrester Woods,
Yep.
they do not pay a space rental fee. That agreement, I think, expires at the end of June. So that will be up for some renegotiation. The history of that program is that the city used to operate the kind of adult day services program that was then spun off into Helping Hands Respite Center at the time, and then merged with Forrester Woods. So the city used to operate that program directly, kind of passed it off to a nonprofit, and so there's kind of that legacy of the city had paid, I think, about $10,000 a year to say, hey, you're going to operate this program for us, and you can use this space at no cost. That's why that relationship is set up in that current way.
Yep. I mean, the issue is that all this stuff costs money, right? And we have to figure out how to pay for it. And that's the origins of my question.
I understand.
The debt service that you've listed on this slide for Parks and Recreation Fund, it says it includes expenses for third floor renovation. Does that refer to this building?
Yes.
But that's not on the list of projects here.
So
Or is it?
that would be part of, are you on the slideshow or in the budget document?
On this slide here.
Well, yes, so that would be something that realistically would not get started until fiscal year '28. So it's kind of part of the amount for the issue, but not in the fiscal year '27 budget. And I think that's a great segue to point out kind of the 5-year capital improvement program document, which I believe Robert had shared. The page number was, I think the 5-year spreadsheet starts on page 41 in your agenda item report. And that will show all of those project expenditures for the next 6 fiscal years, including this fiscal year. And so the interplay of that is that first column that shows fiscal year '27 is what's in the budget document, and then the future years are kind of forecasted. Some of the projects that are identified for bond financing are a little bit more, I would say they are more robust estimates of those future costs. Compared to maybe a project identified 5 years out, I can't reasonably predict what level of inflation might hit in 5 years. But the projects that are identified, at least for bond financing, have a pretty reliable estimate of probable cost.
So for the third floor renovation, we've been talking about this for a long time. And we've been talking about it since, this turn of mine on the council. We were going to spend some ARPA money on that and decided not to, and it turns out it was good that we didn't because we needed that money for other things. Have we, so we continue to budget for that renovation. Do we continue to think that it's a good idea?
Yeah,
Robert?
so let me provide 2 observations.
Okay.
One is the biggest draw back to renovating the third floor was a belief we needed to install an exterior fire escape system. After thorough review by building official in the fire department, they've issued a memo and said that is not required.
Did we know that?
No, well,
Not
we just
at all.
found out.
Or we just, okay.
We just
Yeah, we
found
just
out.
found out a couple weeks ago.
This is a big deal.
So this
So
is
it
based
was,
on
you know,
updated code and adoption of updated building and fire codes, and they ran that through the IFC or IC, whatever that kind of code authority is. They ran their interpretation of the code through that and identified that no, we would not need to build an exterior egress, that the 2 stairwells that are existing would be sufficient. So that's about a $1.5 million cost that this budget assumed we would need to do. And within the last couple of weeks, we heard otherwise, so that would take $1.5 million right off the top of that.
And really, second point is making the renovations to the third floor much more achievable. So we, in years past, applied for congressionally directed spending for that fire escape as well as the renovation. to the tune of just over $6 million. Not very attractive to some of our federal legislators, but with this being removed and then looking at the potential of certain programs in this building that are very popular but limited because of space, does opening up the third floor also generate additional revenue to help offset some of the operating costs of this building. So
So
those
it
are
could
some
pay
of
for
the
itself.
things we want to analyze before we say for certain that it's much more in reach than prior years.
So then my last question is, if we include that in a bond, if we include money for that in a bond, and then upon further analysis decide that it's not within reach or not indicated, are we committed to spending that money that way?
You're not committed to spending it specifically on that, but it would have to be on a public facility. So there is flexibility in it. We would make sure that the language in that bond offering references a little broader approach to renovation of this building and other, be it city hall, fire department, and so have some flexibility. But again, I think there's going to be an expectation by the community that if we do start talking about and analyzing the possibility of renovating the third floor, I'm sure there's some stakeholders in this building that would kind of pressure you to continue to move in that direction. And I see Councilmember Meadows smiling because he's probably already heard some of this. But more importantly, before we even move to a bond issue, we'd make sure we had our numbers refined enough and looked at what the revenue projections would be to help offset some of those costs.
What I will say is that, high-level overview, the expansion to the third floor would allow us to expand programs that we could achieve some economies of scale with some of those programs that are currently artificially limited in the number of participants based on their room size. There are programs where we have wait lists of 16 or more people that if we could expand those into a larger space, receive additional program revenue and help offset any of our operating deficits.
Yep, and fixed costs like
Yes.
administration and so forth.
Yes.
And so then my last question was, you mentioned essentially fixed overhead for bond issuance, right? That makes it better to issue one bond as opposed to
Certainly.
3, for example. Can you give us just a ballpark estimate of what those fixed costs are for bond issuance? How much of a hit would we take?
For this particular bond,
I mean, is it 1% of the bond? Is it?
No, it's actual costs of like your
Attorney's
bond
fee.
counsel, so attorney fees. Your underwriter charges a fee somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000.
So
Okay.
based on that preliminary estimate that we had received from the bond advisor, the amount for the issuance that's in the budget is $341,600.
That's the fixed cost.
Yes.
So every time you do a bond, you're looking at something.
It's proportional to the amount that you issue.
I see.
So a portion of it's proportional, and the other part is
It's fixed.
Yes.
Okay. But potentially at least tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Yes.
if you're going to issue 2 versus 1. Okay. All right. Thank you. Any final questions concerning capital improvements? Mark, you got something?
I'll just say that this news about the outside fire escape and the $1.5 million that we would have had to invest in that is really good news, actually. And it changes my mind completely about the third floor. I'll also note that in a meeting with the LDFA director last week, she brought up the third floor as a potential location, which of course would be a revenue stream for us as well, if that was available for that purpose. But I smiled because almost every senior commission
I would
meeting
say, at
talks
prime
about
time,
the
we're all
way to
gonna say.
expand the program and the number of people waiting to
Yes.
actually take these classes. So this is great news, actually.
It's certainly the same with our program, and I hear from the Seniors Commission almost regularly. They've been very generous to say they would wait until we got through our budget process before they started emailing me regularly again. But I think we're at a point where we have broad community interest in moving forward with that. I will say that the caveat to that being, in order to really effectively use that additional space, we will likely need to look at expanding the available parking spots. I have did some additional calculations in the work, but I believe the original site plan approval limited us to operations on the first and second floor unless we offered additional parking.
Where would we offer additional parking?
We might have to reconfigure the kind of turnaround where you maybe have that loop or whatever. This is a very, very preliminary conversation as far as what might be necessary. I'm still waiting for our principal planner to get back and say, here's the exact number of spaces that you would need under the zoning code to be able to put together kind of that high-level overview. But it could be done with some reconfiguration of kind of the existing surface area.
The circulation plan for this parking lot was controversial when we approved the plan. And part of the consideration was, and I think that might have been in what you're referring to, is that if we ever need more parking, we're going to change the circulation because we've given up a lot of parking spots to have this nice kind of curved in way of getting to the parking lot. So,
If this is even a twinkle in people's eyes, do we want to be spending the money on the new sidewalk right now if it means that we have to?
I think that's a good question, and I'm hoping to be able to have the information on the number of parking spaces that would be required and have a concept plan of that before we move forward with that. Yes, I would say that if we know that we're going to tear something out, then certainly we're not going to install something in a couple of months.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
I'm right there with you.
Okay, great. Any final questions? Is there anything else we need to know? Mr. Bellman, Mr. Dranke, anything else we need to know? Well, that's up to you.
So I want to go to the memo I issued today.
Yes, oh, right. Okay.
Which starts on page 49 of your online packet. It was emailed out to each of you. It was our attempt to kind of provide council with some recommendations of reducing, if not eliminating, the approximately $1.7 million of general fund use of fund balance in order to address the deficit. So I'd like to walk through that with you this evening, kind of get your feedback. I know some of the items impact DPW, the clerk's office, the police department, Parks and Rec, and so I want to kind of walk through that and get some direction so that if you want to see some of these items incorporated, Audrey Kincaid knows that, and she can make that available in the document that is being readied for the public hearing on the 12th, as well as the final document for your consideration and approval at our last meeting in May.
So before you start, I think this would be great to walk us through this. There's also the other memo that you presented us with a few weeks ago with department requests for additional positions and other recommendations.
Right.
And at the last meeting, I think we sort of deflected that back to you, looking for your recommendations on those items. And are those going to be coming separately, or?
Well, we can talk about both of those memos this evening.
Okay, that's fine. So
which one would you like to begin with?
Well, why don't you start with the one that you sent us this afternoon? And
which is more positive, I mean.
Yes, right.
So yesterday, Audrey and I met. We tried to identify opportunities to reduce or make some budget adjustments in the general fund to reduce or eliminate the $1.7 million. But I wanted to start out, as the memo indicate, the deficit in the general fund is right around $2.3 million. And the first effort to reduce that was this vacancy factor that was brought up as part of the discussions with the Financial Health Review Committee and implemented by the Finance Department. So they looked at vacant positions in the Police Department, Finance Department, and 54B District Court, knowing that, yes, these positions are budgeted for, but realistically trying to hire someone and fill them all within the fiscal year may not be realistic. So there was a vacancy factor that reduced expenses. I think Audrey indicated a contra account was established, totaling $643,000. That then reduced the deficit down to the 1.7 that we're going to speak about other options to reduce. So on the list was modifying the current practice of budgeting for family health care plan for all vacant positions to a double or two-person plan would reduce the employer health care contribution by $106,040. Next is the healthcare task force met, which includes representatives from all of the bargaining units as well as the non-union. And they were reviewing ways to reduce the 9.1% increase that we are going to receive from the West Michigan Health Insurance Pool for next year's healthcare costs. And so they looked at plan design, redesign. They looked at whether to introduce and move to a high deductible health plan or follow PA 152, which is the 80-20 or the hard cap. They ultimately chose the hard cap. So using that calculation, the employee co-share would be $261,310. Again, reducing the employer's portion of those expenses. DPW Environmental Service DNR tree canopy grant matching revenue wasn't initially included in the budget, so that's $50,000 on the list. And then election equipment funding, the $195,000 is identified. We believe we'll receive funding either directly through the state or through some grant dollars that, you know, we had the initial Michigan Leo $1 million election grant. We had just over $500,000 left of that grant. We have until September 30th of 2029 to spend it. The equipment doesn't get decertified until 2027. I understand from Emily Gordon that the Election Bureau is writing the RFP. The county clerk will, as with all counties, will be the ones, you know, hopefully getting feedback from local clerks on which vendor they want to select, and hopefully there's some funding that will come from either the state, that election grant, or Representative Cernoglu was putting in a request for some state appropriations to assist us with those costs. That would reduce the deficit by $612,350, updating the use of fund balance to just over, right about $1.1 million. So some additional items is the other $270,000 that is identified for election equipment replacement that would come out of that grant or through Representative Cernoglu or covered by the state fund. So we put all the entire amount, about $450,000 for election equipment. We've removed that from the budget, knowing or expecting funding from other sources. So the 270 is the other portion of that. DPW, Environmental Service, eliminate reactive pruning carryover, replace inventory / action plan with tracking protocol, represented about $82,500. Hazardous sidewalk general fund contribution. So annually, the general fund contributes $250,000 to replacing deteriorated or hazardous sidewalk in the community. We're on a cycle that we're supposed to be, 9-10 years, 5 years, and we're probably closer to 20. So this year's budget included appropriating about $500,000 from the income tax, infrastructure allocation to also assist with sidewalk, so the council could remove the general fund and just use the income tax $500,000. It'll get us a little further along, but not as far as what Ron projected with the total $750,000. Police department reduced legal personnel matters. So there's $100,000 in the police budget. Back again, looking at trends, that's dedicated to legal services for personnel related items. Looking at the trend, we spend about $30,000 a year. So reducing that 100 by the 70 gets us down to the average amount, plus there's 100,000 in the police budget for general legal services. So they have about 130,000 to work for legal services, be it personnel or general legal services. HR training estimated initially in this fiscal year at 17,000. After HR Director Kenny looked at what training programs her and her staff wanted to attend, we were able to reduce that by $5,000. We're still looking at the fire budget to see if there's additional reductions or revenues that could be offset with some of the services they provide. Parks Recreation Fund transfer, reduce the transfer from the general fund by $389,000 roughly, and that is representative of three things. So it represents, there was a fund equity, let me make sure I get it, replenishing fund equity by about $48,000. And my statement was, if the general fund's going to transfer 2.6 million, why are we replenishing the fund equity in parks? We should reduce the general fund by that $48,000. There was some analysis that is in the budget document that shows indirect costs being assigned to the aquatic center, totaling $208,820, and to the school-age care program of $131,495. Both programs have historically been self-sufficient, so the idea is to make them self-sufficient, or better yet, when I had a conversation with Justin this morning, he says if council does remove that $389 or $90,000, he would like the flexibility on how to reallocate that reduction throughout other programs and other adjustments. And I recommend embracing that recommendation and just indicate that we're going to reduce our transfer by that $389,000 and allow Parks and Rec to work with finance on how that gets absorbed, as opposed to us saying it must come from the aquatic center or it must come from the school age child care program. So that would, in essence, bring us down to roughly a $30,000 deficit. There's also in here that building and code fees. I'm having some initial conversations with Tim Schultz, the building official, and Elise Hodges, Director of Planning, Building, and Housing, about ensuring that our building fees, permit fees, align with their actual cost, because they are supposed to be full cost recovery. And we're also examining the relationship we have with Meridian Township, where our plumbing, mechanical, and electrical inspector provide services in Meridian, and we get 50% of their permit fees. We want to make sure that the 50% is covering the actual time and cost associated with those services. So there's some additional adjustments that could be forthcoming, but don't have them for tonight or even probably before your budget adoption. But as you mentioned, Mayor, that this budget is a living document that we adjust throughout the year, either with reductions or additional adjustments for grants or programs and services that we need that we did not anticipate. And that goes back to, in part, that April 13th memo, where the reductions to some of the boards and commissions were again tracked, not having been spent. I think you heard from one of the comments under public comment that they've been attempting to use those dollars over 3 years. They haven't been successful, and so those are the ideas of removing them until we're ready to expend them and then come back to council.
Questions, comments?
My comment is that I'm in support of everything in this memo, and I think we should proceed in this manner. I would like to, if there are fee increases that will be reflective also in this, I know that we'll see them before we pass the budget, but as sooner rather than later, I think would be what I would hope. As much as I'm supportive of the before and after program, I have to say that, I want it to pay for itself. And as long as we have some kind of programmatic ability to help those low to moderate income residents of this community to participate in that program, I don't have any problem with raising the regular fees on that. So,
Just to clarify, by fee increases as soon as possible, did you mean the fee increase as soon as possible or notification of the fee increase as soon as possible?
yeah, if there's going to be proposed fee increases as part of this, then I'm just saying I'd like to see them sooner rather than later so that we can absorb them and make a decision, individual decisions as to whether we're going to support those or not.
Steve?
I really applaud the amount of work that each one of the staff have put into this. Finance director, the finance team, each of the different departments. I just am very impressed. I know coming at it very simplistically, say we can't spend more than we make. Mr. Bellman, I really appreciate the due diligence on this. I think it speaks very loudly to our community that we will live within our means. And I know it's hard. It's hard to charge more money for programs, or it's hard to lose some services, but it seems like you've really adjusted where it does not touch the people as much in many of the ways. So I really appreciate all the work you've done on this. And I think that goes to each of the directors. I know I've talked to several directors in passing, and for several months they are working on their budgets day and night. So I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this.
Mr. Grigsby?
Yes, thank you. I just want to ask you about the POL, reduced legal and personal matters. And I apologize, I missed how much of a significant cut that is when you look at the 70,000 from what was there. I missed it. I apologize. Can you hit that back up for me again?
So there's 100,000 for legal relative to personnel matters and another 100,000 for general legal matters. So they had 200,000. When we went back and looked at how much was spent on personnel matters, it ran around 30,000 a year. And so that's where that 70,000 would be reduced, and 130 overall would remain in the police department budget.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So on that point, it seems to me that there's a mix of things on your list here, and some of it is what I think of as pressing air bubbles out of the budget, right? There's budget lines that are, for whatever reason, are higher than they need to be based on past spending, and you have identified some of those and removed them so that the budget's actually more accurate representation of what we expect based on past spending, correct?
I would characterize it that way, but also looking at, the budget included election equipment replacement that we believe could be funded by something else or another entity. And so instead of building that in, waiting until we actually know whether the state will fund, and in whatever that dollar amount they won't, we'll come back and present that to you.
Which is, again, sort of a matter of trying to be as accurate as possible on
Absolutely.
the assumption that some of this money is going to come from elsewhere. But there are also some cuts, right? And one of them is the 389 for Parks and Rec, and I'm supportive of the proposal here and also the flexibility associated with that. And then I did have a question concerning the vacancy factor. So I'm still a little confused about this in my head, but I think that the basic point here is that if we end up filling all those vacancies, then we will have to find an additional $630,000.
If we happen to fill all those vacancies within the fiscal year, yes.
Right. But, and in the future, that vacancy factor may shrink as we fill these positions.
The one thing I've learned, two things. So first of all, timing of those filling will also impact that dollar amount. So once the fiscal year starts in July, if you don't fill them to December, you have 6 months worth of saving versus, and that's why it's a factor and not completely. I think, in fact, for finance, the factor that was used is that the first 6 months might be vacant, so we removed it, but the final 6 months, the position would be filled. So yes, timing is everything, and then future, I would love to say that we will always, once we fill, stay stable and full, but in the 2.5 years I've been here, that has not been the case, so there's always been some turnovers, either for greener pastures or just retirement, which may also be a greener pasture for some.
So maybe that the vacancy factor is actually something that we continue over time.
Yes.
It's just a constant thing.
And it may not be the same dollar amount.
Right. And then I had another question about the 82.5K for eliminating reactive pruning carryover and replacing inventory action plan with tracking portal. I understand the individual words, but I'm not sure what any of that actually signifies.
So I'm going to phone a friend.
Yep, okay. Cliff? Thanks, Justin.
Cliff Walls, DPW. Can you repeat the specific request?
Yeah. So the line item in the memo here is DPW, environmental, eliminate reactive pruning carryover. I have no idea what that is. Oh,
Yeah, the carryover question, the second half, I think I'm better suited for.
okay, we got the big guns.
So
all the guns
the
coming in.
carryover question is, I think we had some emergency pruning that was carried over from, that wasn't completed in '26, and we were just carrying that dollar amount over to '27. Rather than carrying that plus add a '27, we're gonna assume that there's just 1 year's worth of emergency. And obviously, that is something that, if there's no storms, then we don't have that. But this would include an amount, but not the full amount that was originally included.
Okay,
So that's
it-
backing out about $30,000.
And that's just money that was not spent on emergency pruning the year before, and we originally had carried it over, but now we're not going to carry it over.
Correct. And so the reactive pruning contract includes not just like the emergency, calls in the middle of the night, but when we identify something that needs to come down because of its age or a hazard.
Yep.
And then also the stump grinding and the restoration of that landscape. So some of it is predictable in terms of like there's just a mortality rate and just a general rhythm to the life cycle of these trees. But yeah, we typically budget it for what we historically use, but it's so variable because something like last June could happen or it could not, God forbid, but a tornado could, or tornado type winds could come through. So I think this is a safe bet in terms of, budgeting modestly, and then if something happens, we can come back.
Yep.
Like I have no concerns
Okay.
with it. It's just we typically I've probably over budgeted just so it's there, but trying to get more into the practice of coming to council
As
if
needed.
something happens versus budgeting for that if that makes sense.
It makes total sense, and it's in keeping with everything else that we're sort of doing here. And maybe with the block pruning program,
So the block pruning program is the 250 that we budgeted both this year and will continue to budget to
Right.
be proactive.
Yeah.
and as that continues, that may reduce the amount of reactive pruning, right?
Correct. Right now, I would say it increases it because we're looking for problems that we've not looked for 50 years plus. And so there's, when you send a bunch of arborists out to look at all these 80-year-old trees, they're going to find some problems, and we're reacting to that. And those removals are coming from this. But as time goes on, not just we'll have made that full sweep that handles a lot of that deferred maintenance. But what we're doing with block pruning is, removing vectors of decay, eliminating the possibility of, codominant leaders and, other technical arborist terms. But overall, there should be less to react to.
Yep. exactly. And then the other question was about replace inventory action plan with tracking portal.
Yeah, so this is something, it's kind of related. There was a budget for updating our 2012 sustainability action plan. This was something the Commission on the Environment was really interested in, I was really interested in, am really interested in. Did some research with the Graham Institute, the school down at U of M, and got some pricing for what other communities of our size have paid for, one of these planned developments. The emissions inventory is similar, but like working with a service to kind of benchmark ourselves, like our facilities, our community, our transportation programs, all of that, to understand kind of where we're at, and then comparing, moving forward, be able to benchmark against that baseline. It's just something we haven't done probably in 6 years, but just for some inside baseball, I guess, we're working with this company. It's us, Detroit, Kalamazoo, Sterling Heights, all the sustainability cohorts, and the U of M School of Information. Basically, we have this free trial for this program that's NSF funded, and it's this pretty legit and cool program that basically aggregates the existing plans that we have, like our 2012 plan, our comp plan, all the policy resolutions that we have, and kind of develops, rather than taking a snapshot in a moment of time through a plan development and focus groups, it would basically be a living document that, as you pass resolutions, would just feed into it. And then there's this dashboard that you can share with the community to show the progress that we've had on different action items, new goals, old goals, very metric based, which is something that I've really been interested in. Our plan that exists now is very goal oriented, like let's recycle more, but not, we want to hit 30% by whatever date. So this is something I've been kind of trending towards anyways, and I put the budget together, months ago, or my request, and this is part of just the direction that I'm hoping to take anyways, and I've talked with the commission leadership on something that is more living and that it helps tell the story of what we're doing as a sustainability program, because you get talking to people and they're like, oh, I had no idea you guys were doing that. Well, that's really cool. I didn't know about that. A lot of this stuff is buried in that we're somewhat integrated into a lot of different divisions, or like the outcomes that the community is looking for in terms of the environment and sustainability. I don't always have my hands on it. It's just like embedded in the culture of the community, but finding a way to kind of tell that story, not just to the community, but council, can be done in a probably better, more modernized way than what traditionally has been done. I just rambled on there. I recognize that. I guess he's taking something that I want to do anyways, because what I originally proposed is a few months old and things move fast.
Yep.
And new opportunities arise, and we're reacting to them.
Okay, this is all great news.
Well done.
So that's, way to tie that up. No, this is great news, and so it's a worthwhile strategic shift as well as budget benefit. So,
and who knows what it'll exactly look like? Like, we're not going to say we're going to go with X company or not, but this exercise that we're going through with some of our peers is showing possibilities that are exciting, and this aligns with that. It's also cheaper, so that's good.
Well, that's right. All right. Well, thank you for clarifying that, both of you. That helps. It certainly addresses my question.
Every 50th word of his, and then that's what we're came up with the description.
Okay, so any more questions on the memo that the city managers just took us through? I think, do you have sufficient direction, Mr. Bellman, from us concerning this memo? Okay, and then the other memo was the older one.
So the April 13th memo.
The April 13th memo.
Kind of identified, at my request, I've asked departments not to include new items, but if they wanted council to consider them, be it positions or programs, to get them to me in a spreadsheet, and I'd send them, or a memo, and I'd share that with you to let you make the final decision on whether you wanted to allocate resources. Now, I'm going to go through this, that all of the items in here would increase that $30,000.
And
We just
la-
reduced to.
Right, and last time we talked about this, we basically punted it back to you to say which of these do you
Right,
recommend.
so I'll run through some of these
Okay.
just to provide, and keep in mind that some of the positions I'm going to comment on, I respect the request of the department, knowing the operations more intimately than me, but again, knowing our financial position, we may not be in a position to approve them all. City clerk, the addition of a second part-time administrative position, the budget impact is about $30,000. At this point, I would wait to get a better handle on where we're at as the year progresses. The fire department training captain, again, $141,000, almost $142,000. I would wait on that. It was a request they submitted last year. We did not fill it. I, again, would recommend not filling it this year only because of our resources limitations. Parks and Recreation, part-time school, aged care specialist, cost is $55,000, but the budget impact is $27,365. I believe this position, because that program again is self-sufficient, should proceed. Plus, it helps us meet changing requirements in the program. Right? All right. Justin's giving me a thumb up on that one. Reclassify personal trainer to regular part-time. Position cost estimated $65,670. Impact to the budget would be $14,370, but it would be net neutral because we would adjust our fees to cover those additional costs. So I recommend that item number 2 under Parks and Rec. Marketing and sales specialist. Position cost is $86,292. Impact on the budget is $9,972. And again, these positions exist, and so we're adjusting them either by increasing time or including benefits if we're making them full-time. And on this one, I would like to implement and try to see if that helps us generate renting of space in this building during the times that are not being used by city departments. And so I think the $9,900 is a good investment in the Parks and Rec Fund to see if it generates more revenue, and we'll continue to analyze that throughout the years. So the 3 items under Parks and Rec, I recommend proceeding. The police department, the police records assistant, total impact to the budget is $81,350. I do not, at this time, recommend proceeding. I'd like to get a better understanding of the workload in that department and to ensuring the need. The second item is there, I believe, is budgeted for 8 part-time, and the idea would be convert 4 of those to 2 full-time. Impact to the budget is $157,000. I do recommend doing that. I think one of the biggest complaints we're hearing is the lack of enforcement, be it parking or code enforcement. They do generate revenue. I think they would pay for themselves, and so that would be the other one I would recommend proceeding with.
Questions?
I don't have a question, but, I'm supportive of his recommendation. And I'll just note that I think, as you mentioned earlier, that there's the potential for an additional 1.5 million or so in revenue based on other things that may happen over
Correct.
the next couple of months. So I think we can offset that with that additional revenue and keeps us, I think, paying our own way, so to speak. So.
Mr. Grigsby?
Yeah, I'm also in favor of the recommendations and your expertise in going forward with what you're talking about.
Is there any more of that memo that you would like to review with us?
So the other aspect of the memo is Parks and Recreation, the increase of cultural arts grant funding. I think the actual letter from the commission was included in the online packet, and they're asking for an additional $10,000 to their already $45,000 allocation from the general fund. I do not, at this point, recommend using general fund. If they have monies in the art fund that could be used for this, and they feel important to proceed, I recommend using that fund that has been set aside. And so I don't know if Audrey has, whether or not the art fund itself or Justin has money in their fund balance that could be used if we want to honor the request of that commission.
Yes, there would be a fund balance to cover that $10,000 increase. However, under the recently adopted changes to the public art, percent for art ordinance, the public art fund is restricted to what it can spend money on as far as those specific projects. The monies that come in are related to the percent for art ordinance. That definition of allowable expenses has been broadened, but it may require the Arts Commission to go back and amend some of the program requirements for the cultural arts grant for that, if that $10,000 increase were to come from the public art revenues.
I guess my reaction is, under the circumstances, I think that having a $45,000 cultural arts grant fund is pretty generous, and I'm not inclined to argue that we should be increasing it by 20%.
I'm in agreement with that.
Anything else?
No, that's all I have.
Okay. Anything else that we need to touch on in terms of budget? Is there anything that staff would like us to know that we don't know, that we haven't heard, that we haven't asked about?
Nothing I'm aware of, but Audrey's shaking her head no,
Okay,
so I
going
think we're
once,
good.
going twice. Okay. Boom. Anything from council?
So,
Steve?
Mayor, I'm sorry. What's the procedure now? This is, again, the first time.
Well, so this was discussion-only meeting. Our main goal tonight was, I think, to hear the presentations, ask questions, make sure that we're satisfied. That was one main goal. Another important goal was giving the city manager direction about his deficit reduction plan and his other memo, and I think he has the direction he needs
Yes.
from us now.
And so the budget will be amended accordingly and presented for the May 12th public hearing, and again, on the final meeting in May for adoption.
And I actually just
Let me
want
just, quick follow-up.
Go ahead.
And
Yep.
then the financial commission that,
Financial health team recommendations would likely be for next year's budget, not this, although at least one has already been adopted.
Right, and others
We will
could,
have that in June, so,
and you could always amend
we can always
after the
amend.
fiscal year begins to incorporate any of the suggestions that they bring forward. There's a interim report. Has that been submitted yet? So it'll probably be on your May 12th agenda that the committee has put together an interim report at your request. We'll put it into an AIR and submit it as part of the consent agenda.
so the vote would be on May 26th.
Correct. That's when we will adopt the budget.
Thank you for that
Thank
date.
you.
Yep.
I appreciate that.
Any further comments, questions,
I
Mr.
have
Meadows?
Just a couple of questions. The, in 2025, the LAPOC, the commission recommended a budget of $100,000. But I don't recall the commission voting on a budget recommendation this year. So if you can check that out for me, I haven't been at every meeting, I have to say, so it could have happened when I wasn't there, but I don't recall it happening. But I just want to note that, unless I'm reading this wrong, the total budget for all our boards and commissions is $67,330, which
That's
is
correct.
largely very small amounts for most of our boards and commissions. And of that, $40,400 is for LAPOC.
That's correct.
So almost 2/3 of the money is going to LAPOC. So I'm not sure why we're being criticized for a reduction that may or may not even have happened. But I'd like some clarification on that as we go forward, okay?
So I believe I provided budget information in my memo to their staff liaison, which is HR Director Emily Kenny, and I believe she's communicated that to them.
Okay.
But I don't know if anything's come of that other than the comments that we've heard tonight.
And do we have an official budget request from the commission?
We do not.
Okay. Well, it's hard to reduce a budget that hasn't been recommended. And I'll note that, just on my basic stuff, our budget has been reduced by $47,665, and the city manager's budget has been reduced by $47,000. So we're all sharing the pain here. Let me just say that.
And I guess that's the point I tried to make to Fox 47 and other news outlets, that this has been an across-the-board approach. It wasn't specific to any board or commission or any department. It was an approach that we tried to ask everybody to realistically look at their expense trends and align their budget accordingly. If there was something new, again, that went into that memo and brought to you.
Chuck, anything? Good. So I think this is really remarkable progress. So we started off with, depending on how you counted, 1.7 or 2 point something $million structural deficit, and we're now down to a few tens of thousands of dollars. To temper the good news a little bit, I just wanted to confirm that, assuming that we implement all these suggestions, that's still net of bond service costs for infrastructure, right? So
if we go to sell a bond to do our capital improvements, we would have the annual debt service. Some of that would hit the general fund. Some would hit other funds that those improvements support, but that is not in the current budget.
That's not in the current budget. And when that time comes, we will have a breakdown of how much will hit the general fund and how much will hit.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that started with, the preliminary list that was provided to you as part of the March 10th discussion-only meeting. So that gives you some sense of, and we can pull that back out and I'll send it to you, give you some sense of what those dollars.
The overall debt service cost is going to be about $1 million, if I remember right from Justin's slide. And I'm thinking the general fund is probably 700,000 of that.
I don't have.
Just as a ballpark.
Audrey had to pull up the slide deck for me again, but it's about 320 to 360,000 is the estimate for the general fund.
And
portion.
the rest would be other funds?
Yes.
Okay, that's lower than I thought.
The big portion of that total amount includes an estimate for all of the fall protection for the parking facilities, which would be in the parking fund, but also may not be necessary if there is alternative funding for that.
Okay, great, that's helpful. I'm a little
And
startled.
again, the fall prevention is a grant we're seeking. If we're unsuccessful, you'd have another opportunity to discuss whether you want to invest that $3.4 million.
In that way or in some other way, perhaps.
Right, exactly.
Perhaps. Yeah, okay. All right, well, this is not bad news at some level. I'm a little startled. I'm not quite sure what to do, frankly.
Take it.
Take it is exactly right. All right, any final discussion items on the budget? If not, that brings us to the last item on the agenda, which is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Moved by Grigsby, second by Whalen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you all.